Good morning. If people would come in and be settled down, we'll get started. Welcome. I'm John Curran, President and CEO of ARIN. I'd like to kick off our ARIN member meeting this morning. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Network Webcast and Break sponsor Comcast, Google, and ServerHub. I'd like to remind everyone we're in the middle of an election. If you're a designated member representative and can vote, please vote now. Go to public, arin.net, public election. If you have any questions, you can find Judd out at the election desk for voting assistance. Our election voting closes on Sunday, October 19th. Rules and reminders. If you should approach the microphone, state your name and affiliation. Each time you're recognized, please comply with the rules and courtesies outlined in the program. Today's agenda, lots of reports and updates. NRO activity report, NRO number council report, ARIN departmental reports, our customer survey report, the ARIN advisory council report, our ARIN financial report, a fee structure discussion, and a board of trustees report, followed by an open microphone. We have all of this, and we're going to be done by noon. So I'm going to start right in at the head table. I have John Sweeting, chair of the ARIN AC, Vince Cerf, which is the chair of the ARIN board, Paul Anderson, who is our vice chair and treasurer. I have Bill Woodcock, board member, and I have Aaron Hughes. Wow, I know these guys and I can't remember their name. Okay, so let's start right out. NRO number council, NRO activities report, which I will give. The NRO is the organization we use to coordinate the RIRs, and the 5 RIR CEOs participate as the executive council. So I'm going to bring up the NRO activities report and update you folks on what we've been doing. Mission, to be the flagship and global leader for collaborative internet number resource management as a central element of an open, stable, secure internet. I guess we declared ourselves a mission so people know what we do. And we're going to give a quick introduction, talk about our focus areas, and then talk about our activities. We're incorporated in 2003. Not incorporated. We're formed in 2003. We're a lightweight, unincorporated association, i.e. it really is just a coordination function. We meet together, we share activities, but everything we do is generally done back in the individual regional organizations. Our goal is to encourage a coordinated internet number registry system, promote the multi-stakeholder model and bottom-up policy development, coordinate and support joint activities, act as a focal point for input into the RIR system, and the NRO fulfills the role of the ICANN address supporting organization, role within ICANN that is a body that ICANN has for purposes of coordination of policy among names and numbers and in the ICANN structure. Our key focus areas, obviously, are supporting the RIR coordination, global collaboration, and governance coordination, proper branding and positioning of the NRO, and we can monitor and contribute to the global internet governance discussions. The executive committee is made up of all 5 RIR CEOs. Adiel from Afrinic is our chair. Axel Pollock, who's hiding in the room somewhere, is from RIPE, is secretary this year. Ernesto from LACNIC is the treasurer. Paul Wilson and myself are also on the executive committee. The secretariat is hosted by the RIPE NCC. And the executive secretary is Herman, who's, I don't know if is Herman here this week? No, I think Herman's out. And we have coordination groups. So we sort of take each RIR and we go horizontally and we take the communications teams, the political team, the engineering group, the registration services group, and we have groups within the NRO which coordinate, for example, our communications. So when we're working on something for a presentation at ICANN or the ITU, the coordination, the communication department managers of the 5 RIRs will work together, so we only have to develop one document that we can all use. Expenses, NRO does have some expense for the executive director in in Herman. And we also have travel. We also contribute to ICANN. The contribution is $823K annual. It's been that way for about a decade. Those expenses are divided up among the RIRs based on a formula based on the size of each one, based on the registration services revenue. We have a representative in the Internet Governance Forum, multi-stakeholder group that coordinates the agendas of the IGF, Paul Wilson and Paul Rendeck. We actually just came from the 9th IGF, the Internet Governance Forum in Istanbul. We did a contribution to help make the IGF happen, and then we did a booth to explain the RIR system. It's very helpful. A lot of governments, a lot of organizations that may not make it to an RIR meeting can go, they attend the Internet Governance Forum because of the wide range of topics there, and they get to hear about the registry system. So a very useful outreach that we do. We've been active, obviously, on this Internet Governance and IANA stewardship transition activity, including responses regarding ICANN's accountability, responses indicating that we would participate in the planning function for the transition of NTI's stewardship. We have been active in the WTPF, the ITU World Telecommunications Policy Forum. All of the documents and communications we have are on the website. You can go to the NRO website. We are in regard to IANA oversight transition. Adiel and Paul Wilson are members of that ICG, the IANA Transition Planning Coordination Group. We've also been involved among the internet organizations, so not just ICANN and RIRs, but also the IETF, ISOC. There's an organization called the iStar Collaboration. We get together periodically to help coordinate issues across our organizations, and that actually led to a statement, a statement regarding Net Mundial. It's been instrumental in helping get initiatives off the ground. Net Mundial was a significant meeting earlier this year. We were an active participant in it, and we actually participated in the Executive Multi-Stakeholder Committee, which was involved in making it happen. We had contributions, and we actually helped with the final Net Mundial statement. We have a nice new ASO website that we worked on this year. We have an RIR governance matrix that covers the governance mechanisms of each of the RIRs in a comparative way. So if you want to see, for example, you want to see what each RIR has in terms of how its budget is set, or how its board is elected, or how, what law it operates under, what it has for appeal processes. There's a matrix on the NRO website that compares the RIRs, not just in terms of policy. We've always had a policy matrix comparison, but now in terms of our governance structures. We've been adding a lot of content regarding the IANA oversight onto the NRO website. We will get more up there as soon as it gets settled. That's the report, and I'd like to thank everyone and open for questions. Okay, thank you. I'm now going to call up Jason Schiller to give the NRO Number Council report. Oh, okay. I will sing. What shall I sing? Come on up, Jason. We can do a duet. You have a large, oh, here you go. You're up.
Good morning. My name is Jason Schiller, and I'm on the ASO AC NRO NC, and I'm going to give the NRO NC report. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about what the NRO NC is, our recent activities. What is the NRO? Unfortunately, there's an alphabet soup of acronyms: ICANN, which performs the IANA function, the NRO NC, which performs the ASO AC function. It's all rather complicated. So I'm going to talk about these a little bit. The NRO is the Number Resource Organization. It was formed by the NRO MOU, and it has the purpose of coordinating the 5 RIRs so that they can act collectively and speak with one voice. It also spends the RIR's money and protects the bottom-up policy development process. And it consists of the NRO EC, which is the Executive Council, which you just heard that report from John, the NRO-NC, which is the body that I sit on, and we have a secretariat. So the Executive Council, which you just heard about, is the 5 RIRs, and it basically speaks on behalf of the RIRs. The Number Council speaks on behalf of the community. We have 3 members elected or appointed from each of the 5 regions, so we're a 15-member group, and we perform the function of the ASO-AC, which was established under the NRO and ICANN signed ASO MOU. And what this does is this establishes the fact that the NRO-NC will perform the ASO-AC function. It defines how we process global policy development and defines how we provide recommendation to the ICANN board on number issues and also the creation of new RIRs. So what is the ASO-AC? It's an ICANN supporting organization. It's the address supporting organization. And there is an address council as well, which is basically the function that the NRO-NC serves. And basically what we do is we oversee global number policy work. We make sure that the policy proposal process has been followed and shepherd that. We also appoint 2 directors, seats 9 and 10, to the ICANN board. And we also appoint or serve on various other ICANN bodies and advise ICANN when needed. These are the members. In this region, we have myself, Ron Da Silva, and Louis Lee, who is the chair. He's been the chair for quite a few years now. Currently, there are no global policy proposals on our docket. If there were a global policy proposal, it would go through the standard policy development. And the way that works is it goes through the regional policy development in each of the 5 regions. Hopefully, the same text is agreed upon. That gets sent up to the NRO. If the text is not identical, there can be some wordsmithing and rewriting to make them identical. That gets sent to the NRO-EC for review to make sure that the intent of the policy has not changed from what was discussed in the individual 5 regions. We make sure that the policy development process was followed, that all interested concerns have been discussed and addressed, and we send it up to the ICANN board, who can then ratify it, sit on it, or if they have significant questions that haven't been addressed, send it back down for further discussion. So this is really the meat of the presentation. What have we done for you lately? We had our ASO-AC face-to-face meeting at ICANN 50 in London. We discussed the revamp of the NRO website. We discussed the potential need for a global or global coordinated policy on IPv4 address transfers. We updated our operating procedures. We now have better procedures for appointments that are not the ICANN board. And we also discussed a need to expedite the ASO member selection. So there's been a little bit of a shakeup in terms of the timelines, in terms of when ICANN board members get selected and placed on the ICANN board. So all of our timelines have shifted. And a lot of this work is now going to be starting in October. I'll give you a timeline at the end. So there was some discussion of, gee, wouldn't it be great if in October we knew who was going to be sitting on the council next year, when this process is already started in October. We also held a 2-hour ASO-AC workshop. We discussed LACNIC v4 runout. We discussed the various soft landing policies in the different communities, the current status of transfer policies, and also where we are in terms of IPv6 adoption and what the impact of World IPv6 Launch Day was. And we also discussed the IANA redistribution policy. So our focus really was on winding down IPv4. Sadly, our workshop was not heavily attended by members of the traditional ICANN attendees. We did see a lot of faces from this community and the other RIRs, though. Recent appointments. We have a new ASO-AC member from APNIC who will be starting in January, Dr. A.J. Kumar. We also appointed Hans Petter Holland, who used to be on the ASO-AC, to the ICANN NOMCOM, and Hartmut Glasser is serving on the Oversight Transition Coordination Group. So, at the last ARIN meeting, there was a bit of a scurry. LACNIC was about to run out of ASNs and they were going to go back for more, and we suddenly realized that there were less 2-byte ASNs in the pool than LACNIC could potentially take out in one go. And there was a little bit of a panic and a little bit of an excitement, and it kicked off this discussion in this region about what is the right thing to do with regard to 2-byte and 4-byte ASNs. And in this region, we noted that we are primarily using 2-byte ASNs and very few 4-byte ASNs. So what's going to happen in this region likely is we're going to run out of 2-byte ASNs, and we will be sitting on 4-byte ASNs. And if those 4-byte ASNs are underutilized enough, we will not qualify to get more ASNs from the IANA. So the question was, can we sort of set aside the 4-byte ASN utilization and the 2-byte ASN utilization and look at them separately? And we had discussions in this community at Open Mic. We had an emergency ASOAC meeting. We had a breakout table at breakfast. And what we heard from this community is there's no reason why anybody shouldn't be able to use 4-byte ASNs. And if we give out too many 2-byte ASNs and not enough 4-byte ASNs, well, then people will start using 4-byte ASNs, and this is not a technical problem. So this actually conversation spurred off questions from the IANA, and they asked for some advice regarding the Internet Assigned Authority policy for allocation of ASN blocks to the regional internet registries. This is the policy here. It basically says after December 31st, 2010, there will be no distinction between 16-bit and 32-bit ASNs. And this is the policy under which they're given out. You have to show that you're 80% used before you can come back and get more. So the RIRs raised this question. It went up to the IANA. The IANA asked for advice directly from us. And what we basically responded with was we said, when judging if an RIR is eligible to receive one or more additional ASN blocks from the IANA per Section 3, the IANA must consider the utilization of the total undifferentiated pool. Meaning, you can't just set the 2-byte ASN usage aside and look only at the 4-byte ASN usage. And you can't just set the 4-byte ASN usage aside and look only at the 2-byte ASN usage. They also asked a question about, you know, it seems that the RIRs are managing them in two separate pools, but the global policy says they have to be undifferentiated. So we commented on that as well. We said how an RIR manages their undifferentiated pool is within each RIR's consideration per their operating procedures and policies. We further stated that there's no requirement in the policy to form the block of 1024 AS numbers out of a single contiguous set. This is consistent with advice that we had previously given to the IANA. So per that advice and per the past practice of RIRs having the option of requesting a block of 1024 addresses that consist of a non-contiguous block of a specific amount of 16-byte and 32-byte only ASNs, this process can continue. We then also turned around and sent a formal response to the NROEC. And we suggested to them that they certainly could decide that they're going to take only 99 2-byte ASNs out of the pool, which would roughly carve it up into 1/5 each. And we asked if such an agreement was reached, that it be done so transparently and openly, and that the RIR communities are informed about such an arrangement. So what's happened? Well, LACNIC came back. They ran out of ASNs. They asked for more. And APNIC did as well. And both of them chose to take only 99 2-byte ASNs. Last thing I wanted to talk to you about is work that we are just about to embark on. We'll be filling seat 9 for the ICANN board. This is a seat that's currently held by Ray Polzak. Seat 10, which is the other seat that we appoint to, is held by Kwawei Wu, which means seat 9 can be filled from anyone that is not from the APNIC region. So we've got the timeline here. We're going to be starting our nomination phase the 24th of October, and this should run all the way through the selection through mid-April. So if you have some recommendations for who you'd like to see on the ICANN board, find myself or Louis or Ron. Let us know who you like and why you like them. And definitely, once the nominations start getting published, please do comment if you have comments to share. Questions? CJ, yes.
Hi, Kathy Aronson. You were talking about the globally coordinated policy on one of those slides. I just wanted, maybe you could speak for just a second, because I had a whole discussion last night about why there isn't a global policy for IPv6, which there once, of course, was, but that a global policy from this perspective is a policy that is developed for specific instructions to the IANA, but there is no global address policy, so to speak. Do you know what I mean? It's the age-old problem, and I think a lot of people may not be up to speed on that.
So I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well,
It
we
sounds like you're
can't,
making a comment.
my point is that under the umbrella of all of this, GORP, you can't actually have a global address policy, for example, because a global policy from the position of the ASO/AC is a specific policy that tells the IANA what to do or what not to do.
Okay,
And
yes.
that's the only global policy that exists, right? Or has that changed?
There's a global policy on ASN distribution. There's, I think,
Right,
three
but that's
global
an
policies, right?
instruction
Yes.
for the IANA.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Yes,
And
so-
what I'm saying is, like, we had a globally coordinated IPv6
Yes.
policy for like 5 minutes, and then individual RIRs changed it, which they can do. But there isn't a mechanism for there to be a global policy that does not tell the IANA what to do. And I
Yes.
think that the community may not, everybody might not understand that.
Okay, so let me take a minute to explain what global policy is and what global coordinated policy is, and let me also address the concern about it changing. So a global policy is one that has in its definition some action that the IANA must take. So these policies can also have regional pieces to them as well. They can have requirements on the individual RIRs. So for example, a policy that says the IANA will give out ASNs in a certain size block, and the RIRs must manage them to 80% full before they can come back and get more. And the RIRs must manage them as an undifferentiated pool. So this policy has requirements both on the IANA and the RIRs as well. And this is a global policy by definition because it requires the IANA to do something. A global coordinated policy is a policy that does not have any impact on the IANA. So for example, we might have a policy that says when any RIR runs out of business as usual IPv4 space from the free pool, the 4 other RIRs should immediately empty their pools as well. And what's important here is the action that a particular individual RIR is doing only makes sense in the context of all the other RIRs also doing that behavior. So that would be what we call a global coordinated policy. The problem is we have no mechanism to lock down in the Number Resource Policy Manual that this set of text is globally coordinated, and as soon as we touch it and it differs from another region, that breaks. We have an implementation timeline that says we will implement this when it passes in the 4 other regions, but we have no de-implementation plan or de-implementation timeline if the text falls out of sync. So that is certainly, and we have a very sophisticated global policy development process with specific roles that the NRO/NC has to undertake in terms of tracking and notification. We don't have that formal process set up for globally coordinated policies, although we do tend to follow it. So yes, there are certainly some challenges with respect to globally coordinated policies. Did that cover your questions and concerns?
Yeah, I think so. It's just that, like I said, we had the globally coordinated V6 policy, but there's no mechanism to keep it in sync, and that, right.
I'm closing the mics. All right, thank you, everyone.
Very good. We're now going to proceed with the ARIN departmental reports. First one up is going to be Mark Costers doing the engineering report.
So good morning, everybody. This talk is going to have a bunch of uppers and downers. So depending on your drug of choice, it's all here. So let's go ahead and get started. The first one's a downer, and that is Tim Christensen, who's been employed here at ARIN for 14 years. He passed away suddenly on August 5th. So this was a big loss for ARIN in that he was our DBA for many years. And he knew how everything was from the Wayback Machine. So this is a big loss. We were able to shore up our staffing, but I want to let you all know that you will not see Tim here anymore. Okay, now for more of the uppers. So let's go on to our staffing. We have 6 operations engineers and 2 managers. In development, we have 8 programmers and a manager. In software integration, which was formerly known as quality assurance, we've had a leadership change, of course, with Tim passing. We now have Garth Dubin, who's in the back of the room. Garth, could you stand for everybody? Who's taking over software integration. Also, if the whole engineering team, since everyone is really close, we decided to bring out the engineering team so that those who hadn't been to an ARIN meeting could see what it's all about. I'm wondering if you guys could all stand. I know this is a lot of work for you guys. So in project management, we have Deb, who was a development person before, and of course me. So accomplishments since ARIN 33. So DNS and now DNSSEC have near real-time updates. We've added TTLs for both name service and DS records, so you can go ahead and change yours at your leisure within ARIN Online and through our RESTful API. We also hardened our signing infrastructure. We're now using secure 64 boxes, which is essentially HSM, and also does the signing. We've also enabled our with DNSSEC our forward zones and our individual reverse through the same box. We've implemented shared tickets, as Nate talked about, displaying agreements associated with the organizations related to RSAs, user interface improvements for payment processing, transfers. We've done 8.3, so that's now through ARIN Online, and 8.2 and 8.4 are underway. We're currently working to move away from ARIN HQ with our provisioning production hardware. And I'm going to be talking about some of those reasons why here shortly. And we're also moving away from EMC, which is a very ancient box, to a NetApp, which we use for our SAN. We've made fault tolerance improvements over the past year. The big thing I'll mention here is that we use a virtualized environment big time within ARIN, mainly to save money, but there's been a few cases where we've had to pull some of that stuff away, mainly Microsoft Exchange. Is there anyone from Microsoft here? Okay, good. So it's just it's a huge resource hog, so we basically had to move it to physical hardware to make it behave appropriately. We do a lot of corporate help desk support and IT support. And of course, here at the member meeting, if you have wireless issues, we're here to help, and so on and so forth. So let's talk about OT&E here in a little bit. So this is an environment for you guys to test your code, to test processes. And we've now set up a subdomain, so all the resources that you have under the replicated core services are all named basically very similar to what's in production. It's just under the subdomain otne.arin.net. And the reason why this is all here is for you guys to test. We have lots and lots of APIs for you to use. both on the provisioning side in terms of sending us your SWIPs, but also SWIPs in terms of using the RESTful provisioning service, but also from the directory services side, and also with RPKI. So for those who want to test RPKI but don't want to muck with production, we have a way to do so. And this is somewhat new, but from a participation perspective, we've had 30 new requests since the last ARIN meeting, and we have right now 152 networks that are now playing in this environment. So some of these networks may be may have one or more orgs associated with it, but it's the best way that we can actually show you now, in that this environment is being used by you, and I thank you very much. And for people wanting to go ahead and test new software, to rely on our API. In IETF, Andy and I are very much involved in IETF, both in CIDR and with WEIRDS. We'll talk a little bit more about RDAP here shortly. In ICANN, I'm involved with the Security and Stability Committee, Root Server Committee, and a technical advisory group that's just started out. Now I want to go into, so we've had a couple of uppers. Now I'm going to go back down to a downer again, because you've got to be kind of even killed. So I'm going to talk about an ups incident. We had some DOS attacks and ISP availability that we're currently challenged with. So ARIN HQ, for you who don't know, is actually in a fairly cheap location. It's cheap, and
there's a reason it's cheap.
yeah, there's a reason why it's cheap. So for those who have come to our office, it's right next to the police academy. So when you come to work, it's not uncommon to hear sirens, screeching tires, small arms, and large caliber arms going off. It's also not uncommon to hear planes taking off and landing, because we're right next to Dallas Airport. And to add on to this, we have a major road being under major construction, Route 50. So you have guns, you have ambulances, you have all kinds of sirens, you have construction gear, and you have plane noises. So if you're allergic to noise, this is not the place to be. We also have lack of power diversity. We only have one major line coming in from Virginia Power. And we have lots of lack of connectivity options within ARIN. So we only have two providers that currently provide us service that we could potentially get service from an internet perspective. And as we've gone through this evolution, we've moved out our directory services to the edge, and we call that PFS, Public-Facing Services. But the provisioning side we've kept in-house until recently. Mail, web, and Reg RWS are all internal. And we've had this long-running project to move it out. While this is going on, our ups decided to go up and die on us. And when it died, it was a major event. We actually had to cut out part of our wall structure to get to the insides of the box. And they replaced much of the innards of the boxes, almost all the CPU cards in it, and it turned out to be a single wire that turned out to be an issue with it that caused the UPS to go crazy. And this was a long-running sort of issue. It took about 3 weeks to fix, and during that time, we were on pins and needles. What we did learn is that we could recover. Since I've been at ARIN, and I've been there now for 7 years, we've never had a power outage where the power in our computer room went out until this particular instance. And there were pieces of gear in there that had never been power cycled. And so you know how things go when you have power cycled really old gear. It's under a lot of stress when it first comes up, and that's the time where it's going to fail. And we only had a few minor failures, but we were able to come up. And since we had a couple of times where our ups decided to go up and die on us, we were able to get better and better at this opportunity to recover our systems. And what this really did is, to be honest, I hated this. I absolutely hated this. And it really renewed the emphasis to us moving to our colo, which has its own issues, but that's a separate thing. We're also suffer from periodic DOS attacks, and this is something that is fairly new for us in the sense that they're hitting our provisioning network, They've been hitting our public-facing side for some time, but that's not a really big deal. But hitting our provisioning network is something that I don't really like. We have some DOS mitigation, but we don't have enough, and this is something that we need to look at better. We need to be able to cleanse the data so the people who are rightfully trying to send us transactions can get in. ISP availability. We've had multiple connectivity issues with our upstreams from ARIN HQ. Planned maintenance or not planned maintenance, we're always continually being surprised. This irritates me to no end, especially at 2 in the morning, getting a phone call, having to go in the office and find out that a guy down Route 50, which is having the major construction, is doing some fiber splicing. So we've actually saw that about 3 weeks ago. We've also had issues with our West Coast PFS site with announced and unannounced outages as well, but we're working with that. So operational highlights, now we're on the upper again, is that on our publicly facing sites, we've been up 100% over the last 6 years. Services for this, who is RWS, DNS, mailing lists, and FTP. All those things are on PFS. Now you should ask yourself, so why isn't our website on this public-facing services? And the reason why that's true is the public-facing website is integrated with our provisioning system. And so all that is actually pulled into our ARIN HQ. And that is something that we're going to work on in terms of separating the content, static versus dynamic, hopefully, so that we can have at least the static side out and separate from provisioning. Also, I want to stress is when RPKI becomes real in the sense that people are using this in an operational sense, people are testing it now, that we're also going to be going with the same dedication with RPKI. So the repository is out on PFS right now. Here's our ARIN Online usage. And you can see that there's lots and lots of accounts activated. So a huge number. We average about 15,000 a year, new accounts, which is pretty amazing. Here are the number of logins since the inception. And what's interesting on this is that the people who've logged in over 16 times. So ARIN Online is being used. And here's the interesting thing. There was some discussion yesterday about APIs, and why don't the registries all to get together on API? ARIN has a API for its provisioning side that's well documented that anyone can pull down, they can play in the test environment, and actually set up a system to actually interact with us. And you can see that people are taking advantage of this. If you look at there, the bar in red, those are all RESTful transactions. Those are reassignments going over REST. And you can see the blue bar is being templates. They're also increasing, but you can see that they're increasing at a much lesser scale. So people are taking advantage of this, and this is great. Other regional registries are in various states of deployment and doing things. RIPE also has a system where you can actually do provisioning through their REST interface too. Here you can see reports through REST. One of the things you may notice is that associations reports have gone up quite a bit, and the reason for that is we deployed recently, right before ARIN 33, the ability to actually get association reports through the API. But you can see that, for example, Who is a very, very popular service. Okay. DNSSEC, you can see that, well, it's a fraction of a percent that's actually signed with DNSSEC. COM is in the same category. RPKI usage, you can see that there's 153 organizations that are currently using RPKI, or playing with it in our production environment. You can see the covered resources, 332. The thing I'll mention here is that no one's actually asked for up-down yet. So we've not had one single person ask us. Who is queries per second? The thing I'll mention here is you look at the red line, those are the RESTful, it's using the RESTful API. The queries per second, it's much higher over the RESTful API than it is over the traditional port 43 service, which is in blue. They both total 1,000 queries per second. Here's who is over V6, and I did this as a percentage, and you can see that 6% now is actually over V6. IRR maintainers keeps on going up. IRR routes and Route 6 objects keep on going up at a lesser degree. INET nums and INET 6 nums go up as well. Systems on the forefront, RPKI, as I mentioned up down, is available, but no one's taken it. We've upgraded the HSMs to a 4765 since the 4764s that we were on previously have been decommissioned by IBM. We need to keep up to date on being able to get new hardware if we needed to. RDAP is soon to be an RFC. We have a public test bed that's available for anyone who wants to test with it. The other regional registries are also playing this space, as well as domain registries. I want to mention that we're a small engineering shop. I think you all pretty much know this. And we're attempting to provide, and we are providing exceptional service. And we're creating APIs for you to actually create code for on your behalf, because everybody has their own specialized views on how they want to do this. And you have the ability to do this. And one of the things that we'll mention is that we've had one taker so far on creating a tool that they put in the public domain that actually takes advantage of our API, which is a .NET service. ARIN, who is .NET. Here's again what we've accomplished since ARIN 33. We finished up a bunch of ACSPs, DNSSEC for the forward zones, moved the RPKI to a new HSM, made DNS changes to near real time, started automation on transfers, moving core production from ARIN HQ to the Colo, and moving the SAN from EMC to NetApp. And here's what we're planning on doing for next year, which is somewhat provisional because we have to go through the process of getting approval for next year's plan. What has asterisk here is what we're currently working on, moving RDAP pilot into production, further automation of transfers, the production move, a migration of the SAN, and here's what we hope to do for next year: add links to whois queries responses, which is ACSP, change whois output for certain/h, which is also ACSP, start SWIP easy, which is a way for those who are currently doing hand templates, which we see a lot of, allowing them to do this over the web instead, using ARIN Online, and deploy two-factor authentication. So, any comments?
Hi, Mark. I'm going to put my OpenIX hat on for a moment just to talk a little bit about your infrastructure problems. You may or may not be aware that OpenIX has a data center standard called OAX2, open, freely available use of the standard to the general public. There's also some checklists that we have on the website that you can use to kind of validate the types of web services or data center services that you're going to get from your providers. I would highly recommend that you at least require OAX2 compliance in citing of your services. Should be a little bit helpful. And that's it. Looks good. Thank you very much. And I feel your pain on the UPS stuff. It's been a lot of years since I worked on small stuff, but I remember it well. I'm really sympathetic.
Thank you.
Kevin Bloomberg. Mark, I really want to say thank you for the depth of the information that you've given us here, which is why I actually have a couple things on here for you, but I really appreciate this kind of information. With the Colo power, it's the gift, sorry, the UPS power, it's the gift that keeps on giving. Unfortunately, if you took a lot of knocks, and we don't really see that in a lot of your outage reports, so that's the one thing I would ask, is just even a brief, hey, we had an issue with our UPS on this time, we got it resolved, would really help when I then come to the mic the next year to say, well, you notified us of 8 things, and I can see there's a pattern here, Mark, we'd really like, as a community, that you work on that, but we don't really know that right now. But please keep in mind that when hardware takes hits, multiple power hits, the life expectancy of that equipment will drop significantly. I'm really glad you guys are moving this out to somebody who, it's their day job. You guys don't need to be in the colo business. With two-factor, thank you. I see it's being worked on. And I believe that that's great for the community, especially with everything that's going on with, as you saw, the DOS attacks. You're becoming a vector. And my last question was, you mentioned previously about a security audit, having done that and having external, and we talked about just getting a thumbs up, thumbs down, A/B grade, something like that. Are you doing regular external audits now? That just wasn't on here, so I figured I'd ask.
We have it in the budget for next year to do another audit.
Okay.
So yes, that's in the budget and we like to do security audits from an independent third party from here on forward. So it is in the budget for next year.
Perfect. So I'll just,
We did an external third-party audit, including a red team activity, and it was illuminating. I will say that while there was nothing that was terrifying, there was certainly some things that ended up being added to the engineering work list as a result of having fresh eyes look at it. And so we'll periodically have that done because it seems to be a prudent move.
thank you. So I just would reiterate that just a very basic executive, don't need to know the specifics, but just the second time round, you got your first one for free. The second time round, we'd love to see something like that.
Can you go back to the who is queries over V6 slide for a second? Owen DeLong, Black Lotus Communications. Any idea what that dip for a couple of days there at the end is?
It's actually a couple of months. I have no idea. So I looked
Okay.
over the data, and I can't explain it.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, it looks like event traffic to me. If it wasn't there, it would be pretty smooth, and I think I actually know what that event is. I'll take a look, and I'll let you know, Owen. Mark, I wanted to just comment real quick on your DDoS stuff, and you mentioned that, and then someone was asking about, I guess, penetration testing or something. Those are some pretty expensive endeavors, especially with your upstreams. They're not going to want to help you too much because they're going to want you to pay for the traffic that they have to carry. You might want to consider DDoS mitigation services. There are a lot of good ones out there. My colleague runs one. I run one. They're not necessarily inexpensive, but they're probably more inexpensive than doing it yourself. The same with the penetration testing stuff. There are a lot of good services out there. And with respect to DDoS mitigation, there are varying levels of DDoS mitigation, and I would urge you to check into them. I think you'd find that they'd be a little bit less expensive than what we're reading here. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. Great.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Next department report will be Communications and Member Services, and I'll have Susan Hamlin come up and give that.
Good morning, everyone. So a quick update on our activities. And first of all, this picture is a year old, and there's something about working at ARIN that keeps us all young. So I don't think we look much different. So we do have one addition to our staff, bottom right, Sarah Ba, who joined us a couple months ago, and we are sharing her part-time with HR and admin department. So CMSD is somewhat of a hybrid department. We handle sort of association business, taking care of processes and policies, and also communications. So just a list of some of the things we cover, and you know the folks that handle these. Einer takes care of the policy development process, support for the AC. Judd takes care of fellowships, and he also helps NANOG with their fellowship implementation and elections that are going on. Lots of meetings, PPC, these meetings, ARIN on the roads, new member outreach, training and education. And then we have the whole communication side, and Hollis is communications manager, oversees activities, the web content, social media, and then all of us are involved in outreach and work with our PR firm. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So look at some random stats. Those are our current membership and the breakdown by regions. We're very active in social media, and Jennifer has done a great job increasing our blogs. We have a lot of guest bloggers, and if any of you all are interested in contributing, please find us. You can always write to info@arin.net. We'd love to hear from you. So one of the areas, we did a customer survey. Many of you all participated in that last year. And one of the results was something we hoped and knew we would hear from, that we need to make improvements to our website. So we've been working on this, and we work very closely with all of our internal departments. And a couple of examples, recent things we've done working with registration services, is to try and streamline some of the information on processes, transfers, requesting resources, and we're going to continue to make these types of improvements. So here is one recent page we redid. I don't know if you can really tell, but the navigation. So transfers are complicated. There are lots of, so we're trying to streamline where you can go in and find what it is you want to do and quickly follow the steps to accomplish that. Another example, registration services recently put up some examples of documentation that you need to include when you're requesting resources. So some of these things we hear from you when you call the registration services help desk or put in a request, and we do pay attention to that. So I encourage all of you, if you're experiencing any issues, to let us know. Another area this year our department's worked on is the creation of videos, some how-to tools, especially working within ARIN Online. And we will continue to provide these sort of step-by-step, easy things to follow. And we've had pretty good hits. People are actually downloading and watching these. So again, if there are other areas you think a video would be helpful, let us know. We continue to do outreach. A lot of it is still V6 focused. We're getting more involved in internet governance outreach. Some of these represented here, ARIN brings a booth. Some of these, John kindly goes on the road, Nate goes on the road, Richard, Kathy Hanley, to provide presentations to various groups. And that's part of our mission, to provide education. We're here, so if any of you all know an organization that you think could benefit from having an ARIN presence, let us know. We like to send people on the road. Speaking of which, ARIN on the road, we will conduct our 8th, the end of this month, in Columbia, South Carolina. We've held 23 of these. I'm putting together the schedule for next year. And I'm interested if there are any particular geographic areas. If you're in an area where ARIN hasn't been in a while and you think it would be helpful, let me know. I would love to think we'd hit every province, every state, every Caribbean island before we're finished with this program. Okay. At registration, you might have picked up one of these cards that says, Get 6, Connect with IPv6. So ARIN has been conducting outreach, you know this, on IPv6 for probably 8, 9 years. And we started out very much as an informational campaign, just explaining what IPv6 was. We had a lot of AC members that joined various booths, and they showed addresses and just the basics. So this has been going on for quite a while. We feel like we have reached a lot of this community. Obviously, you all know the importance of IPv6, but yet there are a lot of people in perhaps your companies and others, the CEOs, the chief marketing officers, marketers, who don't really understand the need or to pay attention to IPv6. So working with Stanton Communications, our PR firm, we're developing a new approach, and we're really focused on content. With the growth of mobile platforms and content, we think it's a good opportunity to bring a wider message. And to start this campaign, we, at the end of this month, are going to have an open conference call. It's a great opportunity for you all to impart your V6 knowledge, to share ideas, to help us figure out what the best message is for making the business case for IPv6. So I hope some of you will join us on this call. Our goal is to reach out to a broader community, stressing the need to have websites enabled over IPv6 and perhaps draw some attention. So within an organization, the CEOs, the CMOs, the technical people might all get together and collectively understand the importance to help move an organization. So I'm interested in feedback, what people think of the idea, and we'd love to have you join us for that call. So October 28th, if you're interested, just drop us a note at get6@arin.net. Again, we're very active on social media, and I was looking at stats because I was curious, and actually ARIN has tweeted over 9,000 times since 1908, and our followers are growing. It's kind of exciting. So looking ahead for next year, one of the new projects we'd like to try are webinars. Our videos have been successful. My great creative team says we should try webinars. We feel like internally we can develop these and do these pretty low budget. So we are now in the process of identifying topics, probably starting with a few technical topics. We'll try them out. Hope that you all will join us for some of these. And again, website improvements. Our big project next year, we hope, is to move forward with an overhaul of the static site, www.arin.net. You know, last year, or early this year, we implemented a feedback button, which is the top right navigation of every single page. So I want to encourage all of you, if you're on the website, you're looking for something, you can't find it, click that feedback button and just let us know what you're looking for. The customer survey said we need help, but it didn't identify details. So we'll likely be coming back to you all to ask if there are particular areas of the website we need to address, navigation, content, etc. And then we, as always, are looking for ways to improve our outreach and to make it fun and to get people engaged and interested in participating in ARIN. Thank you to our sponsors. We couldn't do this meeting without them. And then looking ahead, we have a public policy consultation in February at NANOG, and the April meeting next year will be in San Francisco. So we hope to see you all there. Fellowship program, applications are now open for the San Francisco meeting. Encourage your colleagues when you go back home to apply. And that's all I have. Questions? Yes, Kevin.
Just Kevin Bloomberg. One very quickly. In the previous presentation, OIT was mentioned, awesome testing, playpen kind of area. We love to be guinea pigs. If you want us to look at UE, like what happened with the election bioinformation as an example, things like that, I'm sure there's a group of people that would occasionally be very happy to go and say, this looks awesome, or this doesn't work on any of my devices. And
So I'm going to hold you that you're going to be one of those people.
More than happy to.
It's on record.
I'm going to hold him to more than that. I want him to help us organize those people.
Even better.
Owen DeLong, Black Lotus Communications, ARIN AC. First, you guys have been doing a great job with the website. The improvements have been dramatic, and I'm very happy with it. Second, one small note of caution. A few of the times when you have improved the website, and the improvements were generally necessary, but things that you get used to going to in a certain place move. And learning the new place becomes tedious. So try to avoid as much of that as possible as you improve things. I realize some of it's inevitable, but thank you.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Yep.
Next, we're going to have the Human Resources Administration Department report, and I'll have ARIN come up and do that. ARIN.
Good morning, everyone. First, I'll be starting with some updates, specifically with the HR and admin team. Oh, whoops, I do have to click the button, don't I? That would help. So we've had 2 new hires on our team. Denise Alston is our new receptionist, and as Susan mentioned, we've had a new hire. Sarah Baugh has joined our team as administrative coordinator, and again, as Susan pointed out, she's splitting her time between CMSD and the HR admin team. So Sarah's helping us with facilities along with booking travel for our employees. Tress Colosi is still an integral part to our team, and she's here today. Tress, if you wouldn't mind standing up. So Tress is getting ready to celebrate her 13th anniversary with ARIN this December. So congratulations, Tress. We really appreciate you being on our team. So you might remember from my last report, we mentioned we were going to convert our timekeeping system. However, instead, we decided to undertake a big project and convert our payroll and our timekeeping system. And the reason behind this was we wanted to improve our reporting features as well as assist with the overall security of our employees' personal information. So we did that in second quarter. The switch went very well, and the system's been fully integrated. So in addition to our standard facility operating and maintenance, as Mark pointed out in his presentation, we had a pretty busy year with our facility, and it's only going to probably get busier considering the space is a little older. So we had a repair to our HVAC unit, and then we also had the repair to the UPS. But both are in working order, so that's good. So moving on to some employee statistics. We have a total of 59 employees with ARIN. 5 of those were new hires this year. And I'm proud to report that our retention is outstanding at 94%. And this was actually a 2% increase since my last report in Phoenix last October. So breaking down some of the demographics of our employee tenure in this next slide, you'll see that approximately 50% of our staff have been with ARIN for 6 years or more. So it's pretty impressive. But we also have a healthy pipeline of new talent that's joined ARIN within the last 6 years. So moving on to some upcoming projects. We've been utilizing the same review system for quite some time, so I think we're all ready for something new. So we will be introducing this later this month. We'll be doing some training. We'll be doing a new performance review mechanism, and it will be rolled out in conjunction with our annual reviews in November. We're also in the process of conducting an employee benefit survey, and this will help us further our current benefits package for our employees. We might make some changes based on those results, or maybe add some new benefits for our employees. We're also looking into some new options for our 401k plan in order to make it more attractive and more current as compared to other companies. So we're looking at adding potentially a Roth 401k option along with a target date fund. A target date fund is a default account that employees can gauge their investments based on their retirement year. So we think those 2 additions could really add some value to that 401k plan for our employees. And last, we're hoping to improve our facility a little bit more by doing some carpeting and painting. So thank you so much for your attention, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Any questions for ARIN? Thank you, ARIN.
Thank you.
And now I'll have Val come up and give the financial services report.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you. I'm going to talk today, as soon as I figure out, there we go, about our staffing, our new banking relationship, and then show you some payment and revenue statistics. We have just 6 of us in the accounting department, and Tammy Rose, our accounting supervisor, and she does a fantastic job. She has 4 people under her, and 2 of them, Tanya and Marsal, have been at the registration services desk since Tuesday. So I hope all of you have gone by and seen them. And they, the 4 of those are, they help with the billing, the collecting, payments, RSAs, and the help desk. So when you call the help desk, you're generally going to get one of those 4 people. And we decided to go out this year and look for a new banking relationship to try to curb some of the fees that we were paying. And we found a wonderful bank. It was Wells Fargo, and they have an excellent lockbox reporting system. They're going to reduce the cost of our fees. The estimate was around $40,000 a year. They are IPv6 enabled. Yes, yes. In fact, I think they even talked at our last conference. And they provide e-verify for ACH payments, which has always been a problem with Tammy because when they come in, there's little information for identification. So this was a huge improvement for us. And they also have a great support team instead of just one manager that you talk to. And their Visa cards are chip enabled for greater security for when we travel.
If I could just interrupt for a moment, the person responsible for the V6 enablement if I could interrupt for just a moment, the person responsible for the V6 enablement of Wells Fargo was here in the room yesterday. I don't know if he still is. Johnny? Yes, right there.
All
Johnny
right.
Martin.
Yay, yay. Okay. So here's just a couple of little charts. This is the payment types that we've been receiving. We basically get checks and credit cards. And if you look at the chart, the checks, the dollar amount is much greater than the credit cards. But this is the first year that we've actually received more credit card payments than we have checks. So we're definitely going into that area, which is great. We like to see that. And wires are not too much. This is an invoicing structure. Again, we have lots of AS and maintenance invoices that go out each month, but in revenue, it's the IPv4 and v6 invoices that bring in the greatest money. And registration revenue, this is showing that it's pretty much staying fairly steady for the 4 revenue groups that I'm showing here. And this is just another look at the revenue mix. And again, you can see that V4 is our main revenue maker. And the maintenance and transfers are coming a little more in line. But again, V4 is the greater of all the revenue that we receive. And that's it. Any questions?
Hi, I'm Martin Hannigan from Akamai Technologies. And on the website, there's a contact us address that says billing@arin.net. It seems to be a black hole. I would appreciate it if you can fix that. Thank you.
I'll pass that along. Thank you very much.
If you could go back to the revenue fraction slide for a second. Owen DeLong, Black Lotus Communications. No, the next one. Nope, nope. No, forward. One more. There. So you've got V6 allocations and V4 allocations as if they're separate, but most people pay one fee for both.
So as it turns out, this probably is mislabeled. You're paying for a category, and if your category is set because you have V4 and V6, it shows up as V4 here. If you're V6 only, and that's how your category is determined, then it shows up as the V4 purple here.
Yeah, I would suggest that makes this graph pretty misleading,
Right.
and that it would be nice to put everybody who has V6
Right.
in the V6 category.
For the moment now, well, here's my question. You just said something that sounds simple, putting the V6 revenue in the V6 category. For someone who has a service plan, which includes both V4 and V6, how do you want us to allocate between them?
Yeah, Paul here also. I'd just like to say, let's not mix up registration statistics, which is another department, and the accounting, please.
I understand. If I can clarify, you're currently taking everybody who's got both and putting them in the V4 category. I'm suggesting you take everybody who's got both and put them in the V6 category, because that gives us a better perspective on the percentage of ARIN's revenue that is likely to go away as V4 fades.
So I think what's probably following up on what Paul said, for this purpose, I'm not sure V4 and V6 distinguishing at this level is appropriate, because what you probably need to do is think about them both as registration services revenue and consider that purple to be green. The analysis you want is long-term under each of the fee schedules. If V4 returns come in, what does the revenue for registration services look like? You can't tell it on a graph either way. That actually has to be modeled. I've done the modeling. So I'll talk about that when we talk about fee structure.
Okay.
Oh, front microphone?
Yes, I'm next. Rob Seastrom, ARIN AC, Time Warner Cable, and a very small, as in would be extra small, but for our V6 allocation, which makes us small and doubles our fee, and which is a discussion for later, where do we show up there? Are we do we get split pro rata?
You're showing up at the V4.
Okay,
The only
thank
people
you.
who are showing up at the V6 is people who have a V6 allocation.
V6 only?
And no V4.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, and now we'll have Leslie come up and give the registration services report.
Try. Good morning, everyone. I have a quick update for the Registration Services Department. So this is the current RSD team. This is the very hardworking RSD team. We have a total of 8 analysts at the moment. I think most of those names look familiar to you guys. We have one analyst out indefinitely on medical leave, so we are short-staffed, and we have not changed our staffing levels for the past 3.5 years. I want to talk a little about our core functions. I don't usually do this, but I've been reading things on the mailing list, and I think people are a little confused about some of the things we do and how we do them. So obviously our main function is IPv4, IPv6, and ASN requests, including all the fun things that go with that, you know, vetting and fraud reports and all those things. We get almost 600 requests in those 3 areas each month. We do transfer requests and related services, STLS. We're doing transfer pre-approvals. Across the board with the 8.2, 8.3, and 8.4 transfers, we're getting about 50 transfer requests a month. We do database record maintenance, and we'd like to devote more time and attention to that to make sure we have an accurate database. We don't have the time at the moment, but we probably will in the future. We do customer support. That's a big part of what we do, obviously. We have Ask ARIN, which is the questions that come in through ARIN Online. We're averaging 250 questions per month there. We run a telephone help desk. We operate that for 60 hours per week. We get about 1,100 calls per month on the help desk. And we do hostmaster@arin.net, which is the catch-all for all the other questions and things that come in. And we get about 19,000 emails in that account each month. We also have a very large role in support functions, which probably most people don't realize, and we spend a lot of time in these areas. Obviously, policy development and implementation with staff assessments, implementation plans, policy experience reports, et cetera. We work with engineering very closely and software development for a lot of the ARIN Online tools and software. We write requirements, we do the testing, we participate in all the sprint planning meetings, et cetera, et cetera. We're heavily involved in communications. We do a lot of writing. We are considered to be the subject matter experts in lots of areas of the registry. So we write guidelines and documentation, announcements, ACSP implementations. We write blogs. And there is a new blog on IPv4 Team Review in case anyone is interested. We released it yesterday or the day before. We do outreach. We participate in all the ARIN on the roads. We do trade shows. We represent ARIN. We do presentations at various places, et cetera, et cetera. And lots of statistics and database analysis. We do monthly stats. We also respond to requests from the community for data and statistics, from the board, from the AC, from whoever wants them. So we have a lot of changing dynamics. We're seeing changing dynamics with IPv4 depletion. We have team review, which I'll talk about in some later slides. We see more out-of-region requests. We see more requests involving new technologies and services, things that we hadn't seen 2 or 3 years ago. We have a new customer profile. We have lots of first-timers. A lot of ISPs are directing their downstream customers to come directly to ARIN for space. And this is requiring more education, a little more hand-holding with these customers. We spend a lot of time with them. We expect to have an increase in our workload in the transfer area, and that would be 8.2s and 8.3s. And we think we'll be seeing a lot more legacy holders coming in to get involved in 8.3 transfers in the post-depletion world. And that is going to require an increase in vetting and chain of custody research because a lot of these legacy records are out of date. And because the legacy records are out of date, a lot of the 8.3 transfers will have to be preceded by 8.2 transfers to bring the registrations current. So factors affecting IPv4 requests directly, team review. Obviously, it slowed down IPv4 request processes. Everything is serialized, all requests and responses. They're processed on a first in, first out basis, and they all now involve a second team member for each customer interaction. There are a lot of customer depletion concerns. concerns about unavailability of IPv4 later. There's some frustration with policies because people want what they want what they need, and sometimes policies get in the way. And that's our job, to implement and enforce policy. So there's sometimes a bit of a headbutting there. And then we are seeing some increased fraudulent activity. So this requires more due diligence, more staff time required to deal with the increase in potentially fraudulent requests and fraud reports. So the increase in the IPv4 workload. So we just went back to one year ago, 2 years ago, 2012. And between then and now, we've seen a 45% increase in the total number of IPv4 request tickets. And of course, obviously, there's more work involved in each ticket because there's more complexity, there's some more fraud, there's more red flags, we ask a lot more questions, and of course, team review. So we're actually up to just under 1,000 requests per month in IPv4, up from, 650 2 years ago. So it's also taking longer to approve IPv4 tickets. So the average approved IPv4 ticket length is reflected in this chart. 2 years ago, it was about 26 days from the time it takes to move the request from receipt to final approval, actually to issuance. And now it's just about 38 days. So it is taking longer. There's more scrutiny involved. And our response times have been running at 3 to 5 business days. Our SLA is 2 business days. I am happy to say, actually, that we have been running a 3 business day turnaround time for about the past week, and I hope that we can maintain it. Not sure, but we're trying. So why are we doing IPv4 team review? Well, this is not a new concept. All the other IRRs who faced depletion did team review, very much like we are doing it. Everything that we do is processed first in, first out. That includes requests and responses. Whatever is in the queue that day gets processed in order. The reason we do it is there's multiple parties vying for this limited inventory, and we see the need for fair and equitable distribution of this limited resource, and this is the way that we think it would work. It works best. And of course, I've mentioned we have 2 analysts reviewing everything, and this is in order to ensure consistent application of policies and procedures. A second set of eyes guarantees that. So the way it works, I know there's been some speculation, so I'm just going to briefly highlight how we actually do this. We have 3 analysts that get assigned about 30 tickets each day to review, with the oldest being reviewed first. They conduct a preliminary review, they write their conclusions, they determine what policy they would qualify under, they determine what questions to ask, action items, they note it in a file. And we have a senior analyst who's dedicated to reviewing these initial assessments and responding. He's making sure that the policies are being followed and that we're applying the right rules, et cetera. And because the prep work has already been done, the responses can be done more quickly. So he follows up in order on the other 3 analysts who are doing analysis. So we think it's more time efficient than having multiple analysts meeting, reviewing, and then responding. So just a clarification on the other things that we do. I've seen some speculation on the list and questions. Specific analysts, we have 4 other analysts that are assigned to all other tasks. So IPv4 team review does not delay these. All of our other tasks are still responding within the 2-day response time per our SLA. Transfers are not team reviewed, but they do involve multiple analysts, and all of the transfers are reviewed by senior staff or by me, and then they are signed off on. So our current IPv4 inventory is down to 0.63/8 equivalent, in our reserved inventory, that which we call returned, revoked, held, the space that we hold that gets returned, or typically that we revoke, sits in a hold bucket, in a quarantine bucket for 60 days to clear filters. So we've got 14.9/16 equivalents there. We still have the /10 reserved for NRPM 4.10 dedicated v4 block to facilitate v6 deployment. We've issued a single /24 from that block, and we have also issued, I think, about a 22's worth to the RIPE NCC, who are conducting an experiment on routability of prefixes smaller than /24. And then we have 225/24 still remaining in the /16 reserve for microallocations. This is the block size distribution. This is on our website. It gets updated every day. We don't have any 9s or 8s, but we have a 10 and an 11, and we go up as high as a little over 1,000/24s remaining in our available inventory. So just to mention, someone had asked me about this, and I just want to mention, ARIN does actually get space back from the ANA per this global policy for post-exhaustion IPv4 allocation mechanisms by the ANA. Okay, that's a long one. So it says that the RARs can return v4 space of any prefix size to IANA, and IANA will then reissue this return space in equal allocation sizes to the five RARs twice per year. That happens in March and in September. The policy was activated in May of 2014 when LACNIC reached their first /9. That is the activation of the policy. And IANA started with about 1.21/8s in total, and they've now issued 10/12s, 2 to each of the RARs. We got them in May of 2000. We each got a single /12 in May 2014. We got another /12 in September of 2014. Our next allocation will come next May of 2015. And I'm not quite sure how much that will be, but you guys are the math kids, so you can probably figure it out better than me. Completed V4 market transfers, transfers to specified recipients. We've completed 91 of them. That encompasses 53,628/24s and 15 ASNs. And inter-RAR transfers, we've completed 42 of them to date, and that encompasses 5,048/24s in total. And talking about ISP members with V4 and V6, we've been tracking this for a while. This one goes back to 2010. At that point in our membership, our ISP members, 75% were IPv4 only, and 25% had V4 and V6. And now, in 2014, at the end of Q3, 58% of our members are V4 only, and 42% have both V4 and V6. And that's out of our almost 5,000 members. And I can tell you in that number, there are 85 organizations that have legacy IPv4 space that also have IPv6, which makes them a member of ARIN by virtue of having their V6. And that's all I have. Are there any questions? Oh, Heather, sorry, didn't see you. Okay.
It's way more my height. Okay. So one of the things you mentioned was that the overall time, Heather Schiller, Google Fiber. One of the things that she mentioned was the overall time for fulfilling requests on average has moved from 26 days to 38 days. But you also said things like a lot of new organizations are coming to you for the first time. They're not familiar with the process. You spend more time with them. Mm-hmm. Do you think that that helps account for some of the amount of time that it's taking?
I think so. We're asking a lot more questions in those cases, yeah, and doing more education.
Yeah, recognize that the total time is both our turnaround time when they give us information, takes us 2-3 days to respond sometimes because of the workload, and then we have to wait for them to respond to our response. So the total time is the sum of all those wait times.
Yes.
And yeah, it's crept up predominantly because of when new people come, they don't understand what we're going to be asking, even if it's on the website.
Right. And so I was also wondering about applications that you see, like how often do they provide you everything that you need in the application sort of on the first or second try? Like how bad is that?
Yeah, it's almost never do they provide us with what we need up front. We've tried to make that simpler. Susan mentioned we've put up examples of what we're looking for and how to provide the data to us. I think that's actually helped. But we, especially with newcomers, we have to ask questions. They don't know what to provide. They really don't.
Okay. And my second question is about, and I'm not sure if you had a slide on it, but the order that you allocate space in. So you have like a /10, 11, maybe like a 13 and a 15. Mm-hmm. Which block do you fragment first? Because we'd heard.
Yeah, I you know what? We've talked about it, and I've been discussing it with my staff. Typically, we would go to. So if somebody needs a.
Someone needs a 14.
Yes. We would likely go into the 13 and break it.
Okay.
That's what we're talking about. Don't hold me to that.
Okay.
We haven't decided for sure. I want to take that back and talk to staff.
Someone had said that you go to the largest block first.
We have done that as well.
That's concerning.
We have done that as well. So we're still discussing.
Okay.
No need to panic yet.
Actually, sorry to disagree with you, but yes, actually panic now because there's only one or two, one or two left at the top. So like going and really, like if you go and break the /10 and someone comes and asks for a 10, you can't give
Right.
it to them
Right.
when you could have broken the 13. So that really does actually have an impact.
Right, got it. Middle, Mike? Or, yeah, I guess middle, or, yeah. I can't, yeah. Middle of the middle, yes.
Sure, I'll start. And I'm a little too tall for this mic, so I guess it's set right. Adam Thompson, Manitoba Internet Exchange. The experimental allocation that was delegated to RIPE for that routing experiment, is there any ETA on when they're supposed to be producing results for that?
There is, and RIPE is right behind you, and they're going to tell you a little bit more.
Hello, Cover Ryan from RIPE NCC. Yeah, so we actually published, after 4 days of running the experiment, we published a basic set of results. We are planning to run it for about 6 months to compile a complete result set. But just to quickly tell you about the results, for S/24, after 4 days, 92% of our RIS peers all around the globe was able to see them. For /25, 14% when there was no route object, and 20% when there was a route object present. And for /28, only 15% when there was a route object, and only 10% when there was no route object. So that's the results after running it for 4 days. But I hope that by next NANOC, we will produce a more detailed or more scientific report. No, 24 after 4 days was only 92%. But that's usual. With or without route object, /24s were 92% after. Yep.
Thanks, Kaveh. The middle?
Hi,
the middle?
Paul from Internet Operating Services. Just a quick aside, since the last ARIN meeting, I've done a couple ASN and IP requests for ourselves and other clients, and we've provided information that's normally required and in the past I know is going to be asked in the first request. But it still seems that even with team review, they're asking for information that's already been attached, already been provided, and that's just slowing down the process more and more.
Right. I've heard that in our customers' transactions a couple of times, and I work with my team on that, and I will continue to. So.
And also, there has been one incident on our part where a ticket number has delayed the actual assignment of the resource because accounting had one ticket number and registration services had another, and we're waiting around for this other allocation, and it just somehow happened to have the wrong ticket going into accounting. Is that done electronically or?
Take that offline.
Yeah, we can talk about it afterwards. Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
That sounds strange.
Yeah, it does. It doesn't sound right. So.
Folks, I am going to close the queue shortly, so if you want to speak on this, come get the queues. Go ahead.
Hey, Leslie.
Hey,
Dan Alexander, ARIN AC. I was curious, not free pool allocations, but if we just focus on the transfers. We were debating proposals yesterday about eliminating need to make the processing more efficient. Do you have a sense of when you guys are doing a transfer review, how much effort actually is going into that needs assessment versus how much effort goes to assessing the chain of custody, that it is a valid resource?
Right. It's an interesting question, and I don't really have a sense of that. All requests get vetted, and we do the chain of custody research, and then we do the needs assessments. I'm not actually sure.
I was just curious if one was harder than the other.
I'll look at it and get back to you.
Thanks.
Hey, Terry.
Hi, Leslie. Terry Summy, DEA. I was just wondering, you mentioned obviously there's an increase in out-of-region requests. Is it possible to get stats on that, the number of requests coming in what areas?
I'm not sure. What do you?
How do we know it's out of region? Because they have a legal office.
Yeah, they have a legal entity. I mean, it would be a guesstimate if.
The challenge is that it only comes up when verifying the information and we start asking them, so we want to validate your past resource usage, and then they give us a list of, like, can you show us the customer assignments or the POP assignments for the dynamic pool, and then they give us back a list of addresses that are in an Asian character set. And we go, well, okay, but we don't, because all of the requests have to come from a legal entity in the region.
Right.
It's not recorded specifically. It's only something we observe when we're trying to process the request during the needs assessment.
Okay.
You know, just to add on to that, I actually have asked my staff to record it in summary files in our own internal files. I might be able to grep through some of that and look. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Hey, Kevin. Oh, Sandy, you want to go?
I think Kevin was at the mic. Yeah? Okay. Sandy Murphy, Parsons. I apologize. I was trying to review the past history to substantiate my thought. In past reports from registration, you have talked about legacy RSAs and the percentage of the space that's legacy and under RSA and not under legacy RSA, and how many are current members and all that sort of stuff. And it's been a while since I've seen those figures. I found it in 2012, but
It's actually on the website. We published that on our website. I haven't included it in the presentation because it is on the website. And we don't see a lot of activity in the legacy RSA area, maybe once a year at this point. So, but it is on the website.
Okay, but the percentage of the ARIN managed space that's legacy is interesting to me.
All the spaces, Aaron, managed, you're saying the percentage that's done per a service agreement versus done otherwise. All of the address space in the ARIN region is
Yes.
subject to ARIN administrative policy.
Yes, I know that. But there's some of the space that is under ARIN management that is considered legacy and not under an RSA.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you go to knowledge and you...
Okay, I'll find
pull
it. No need to take
Yeah, I think it's
people's
in there.
time to
Yeah,
give us
I think
URLs.
you'll find what you want.
And-
If not, send me an email.
Okay, and thank you very much for this. It's a wonderful feast for those of us who are info junkies.
Thanks. Hey, Kevin.
Kevin Bloomberg, I believe I said yesterday I love statistics, well, I hate to love statistics, or I love to hate statistics. One of the things with the request that you're doing, if you're doing it just based on the global number of tickets, it really doesn't get a sense of, for me, what's the most important part, which is how often you're touching an overall request. And you talked about finding it very hard to see the 3 to 5 business days as an example. One thing to consider is including the number of times you've had to go back. So we had 5,000 total requests,
Right.
and 4,000 required 8 interactions, 1,000 required
Right.
1 interaction. And that piece would really help
Yeah, I think
moving
we can
forward.
do that. That's good to know. If somebody wrote that down, I know, because I won't remember.
Yeah.
But we'll have it.
The second thing was, are you planning on doing anything from a surge perspective over the next potentially 2 to 3 years as things continue to ramp up? Is there a plan in place to deal with the surge that you are, that's been going on now for 2 years, showing from your slides?
Are you saying in terms of staffing?
Yes.
Excellent question. So do you believe that the workload will continue to ramp up past, let's put depletion between first quarter next year? After that event, first quarter next year, and you're looking at budgeting for the future year, for the 2015 year, do you believe when there is no inventory that we'll still be getting a healthy workload of allocation and assignment requests all going to the wait list?
I believe it will be worse, because what will happen is a couple of things. You will now have people who are trying to figure out what they have to do to get IPv4 space, and having never even come to ARIN like you're seeing now, their upstreams, that will continue. They won't understand the transfer market, that will continue. Your outreach to help these people. So I think they will potentially be different parts, but all part of RSD. And I don't see that really diminishing, John, in the next 2 years.
I was thinking a lot of them would end up being pointed to the specified transfers facilitator list, the broker list. We do direct quite a few people there now who have requests that aren't going to make allocation policy.
There are people, anyway, my point stands. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I think that ARIN having their own plan potentially to look at surge, I think, is important. Because the last point I was going to make was, I believe that the outreach that the RSD does, that is potentially the first thing that's going to get cut in a situation where where you're not ready to spool up is critical. I've watched help desk during NANOG help new entrants with their issues, and to me that is critical.
Good insight. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay. Go ahead, Marty.
Not sure if this is the right spot, John, but Proposition 213 suggests that there'll be an increase in the CI pool. Where would those addresses come from? From this distribution here or somewhere else?
From this distribution.
Okay.
That's what we've got.
One other question. Can you talk a little bit about what's happening in the CI pool right now? And it seems like there's a pretty considerable amount of requests coming in. Also, there was a suggestion about sparse allocations, and I don't think I've seen that go out yet.
Right.
Is that going to be coming out at some point?
Yeah, we have to go back and work on that. Yes, we have not done that.
So the suggestion has to wait until you guys work on it, or vice versa?
We need to plan for it. So.
Yeah, we just need to double check that we can implement it,
Right.
and then we'll
Right.
respond. I don't see any difficulty with the sparse allocation suggestion.
Okay.
In regard to the CI pool, we don't really report on requests against the CI pool.
We don't, but I know, I can tell you from personal experience, obviously, that we are seeing more internet exchange requests under the microallocation policy, for sure.
And the 3-participant rule has not been a barrier as far as you know?
It doesn't seem
Yep.
to be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we can add more information.
We can
to
add
that.
reporting of the CI pool to the future reports.
Yeah,
You
sure.
can see an update. All right, thank you, Leslie.
Thank you for your attention.
It's break time, but we're also a little behind schedule. I'm going to ask Richard Jimerson to come up and give a customer survey report, and then we'll go to break. So just hold tight. We'll get to one more.
Thank you, John. I'm Richard Jimerson. I'm going to give you an update on the survey. A lot of you were probably present for the meeting last 6 months ago when we actually did an update of the survey for all of you. What we did is we took the survey from the third party that actually conducted it on our behalf, and we give you an untouched, full version of what they had given us. You saw all the raw data, everything that they had given us. There were some real positives in there, and there were some real negatives in there. And we want to let you know that we've been working hard as an organization over the last 6 months, start making improvements inside the organization to answer a lot of the things that you had to say to us inside this survey. We will be doing another one of these surveys in about 1 year from now. We'll be getting that started, and we'll be conducting it again. And it'll allow us to create some markers and actually see where we've made progress or perhaps where we've regressed, where we can start doing some more work inside that area. Some of the post-survey activity you've actually heard in some of the reports that have just preceded this presentation. We've started making improvements in areas where you pointed out to us where there were some shortcomings. You know, some of those things had to do with refining registration process documentation, some of the navigation on the site, and things along those lines. We've been doing a lot of work inside that space. One of the main things that was actually called out on the survey was a desire for us to actually incorporate more internet governance content into our meeting agendas. And I think that you see that we dedicated a good portion of our time yesterday on that topic specifically, and we're starting to pay more attention to that going forward, of course. But one of the more significant things that we did inside the organization during the course of conducting this survey and as a result of the survey results that we got is we added customer advocate review and approval to all changes to our customer-facing products and services inside the organization. I was inserted as a customer advocate inside the company, so every time there is a change that's made that will touch the customer, that will touch anything that you see or anything that involves an interaction with you, it requires review and approval by me inside the organization as the customer advocate. I take a pure customer advocate view of everything that's going on inside the organization on your behalf. And that's been an interesting process over the last 6 months, but I think that we've made some really good decisions as a result of it as an organization over the last 6 months. Another thing that we do to receive feedback from you, in addition to this large survey that we did earlier this year, is we do transaction surveys. So every time there's a request for IPv4 address space, IPv6 address space, or an autonomous system number, we provide a link to a transaction survey. And quite a few of you do use those transaction surveys. The results are reviewed on a daily basis by the director, Leslie, in that department. And she regularly reports that information to both the chief operating officer and to myself. And we sit down and we have discussions about that. But Leslie and her team, they are making adjustments in real time as they're receiving feedback from you. For instance, Leslie brought up just at the microphone a few moments ago that they had received some comments about perhaps we're asking a question when the information is already available, and Leslie's constantly coaching her teams based on the feedback that we're receiving in those transaction surveys. One of the other things that we did to hear more from you in terms of what we're doing as an organization and how we can improve is we launched a feedback button on our website. Now that was on our public site, and it's also available inside ARIN Online, and we received pretty good traffic on that over the last 6 months. We launched that on April 5th of this year, and here's some stats through October 1st of this year. About 1/3 of everything that we received over this feedback button is for the intended use, the type of things that we were looking for when we put up that feedback button. And I think that's a pretty good result. We were kind of afraid that maybe it would be less than that, but 1/3 is really good amount of interactions with us for the intended use. So some of this stuff is more internet help desk related, and I'll give you a few examples of what that looks like. 29 of them were stop attacking me type messages. And the largest grouping was tests and spam. Early on we did a lot of tests to the feedback button, so I counted those. But there are people trying to sell our organization, everything from the type of services that you provide in the room to furniture for our offices and things like that using this feedback button. It's pretty interesting, but we do get that too. Here's some samples of what the intended usage of that feedback button were. Someone had told us the site is slow and fails to load pages. It eventually loads after many retries. It's most problematic when filling out forms. So this was someone one day, they were in ARIN Online and they were submitting requests. They were filling out forms inside ARIN Online and they noticed that things were moving slow. They submitted something on this feedback button, exact intent of what we had that there for. And we were immediately able to contact our ops team inside the organization, and they actually did. They found some processes that were going on that were slowing things down, and they immediately corrected this. And we were able to get back to that customer and let them know that we did that, and also this fixed this for everyone else who might have been having that problem who hadn't spoken up yet. So that's a great use of this feedback button, and it's really helping out. Here's another example of the intended use. An organization sent something to the feedback button, and they said, person 1 no longer works for us. How can he be removed? In addition, I would like to add person 2 and let him have the same functionality as person 1. Can this be done? Thanks. So basically, this is an organization where they had one individual that was managing all of their interactions with ARIN, and that person left the organization. No one else in the organization understood how ARIN worked or exactly how they would manage the resources, and they couldn't find the place on the website where they might go find out that information or how to contact us otherwise, so they used this feedback button. This actually helped the customer, and it helped us in 2 ways. It helped the customer because they got a response from us and they got the information they needed. The way that it helped ARIN, the organization, is there was a customer with a need and we were able to immediately help them. There were other channels they could have gone through and we would have been able to help them there too. But a second important thing it did is it told us that it might not be obvious to some of the customers that are using our services where to actually go and get this done. So it helps us when we're improving our registration documentation and those types of things on the website to get this type of feedback, and it's been very helpful. And here I'm a little bit faster. Sample, internet help desk uses. You can just read through these. Hey, my internet's not working, my games aren't working right, and can you fix it for me? We get a lot of that. That's kind of interesting. We really can't help this kid, but we sent them a message back and responded to them. This other person forgot their password from Facebook and Yahoo, and they want us to help them log in again. We get a lot of stuff like that. It's kind of interesting. We also get that at Hostmaster. Some people want us to stop attacking them. Someone saw that an address in the TIN network was attacking their network. And so they went to Whois and they found out that that's registered ARIN. So obviously ARIN was attacking them, and we get that a lot. Someone else, you can see there, had a similar problem, and they want us to stop spying on them. That's it. Feedback button's been great, and it's been wonderful working with you guys over the last 6 months, and you've got a great team inside the organization that really does care about what we do for you on your behalf, and we're going to continue to do that. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Richard? Any questions for Richard? Okay, thank you, Richard. Excellent. Okay, we're going to move to break, and we're going to come back most expeditiously. So it says that the break is, let's see, it says the break is 5 minutes. I'm going to give you 15. I'll see you back in here promptly at 11. We have a sighting. There he is. Okay, we're here. I'd now like to resume the program in progress. And next up is John Sweeting, who will give the ARIN Advisory Council report. If people will come in and be seated, John, I'll turn it over to you. Go ahead.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm John Sweeting, Chair of the Advisory Council, giving my last update on ARIN Advisory Council as the Chair of the ARIN Advisory Council. All right, so the Advisory Council consists of 15 elected members with 3-year terms. Here's a picture of the current mugshots of all of us. This year is, like every year, is a election year. So the AC members serve 3-year terms, 5 members up each year. Terms ending this year are myself, Dan Alexander, David Farmer, Bill Dart, Kevin Bloomberg, and Andrew Dull. You notice there's 6 names there. That's because Andrew filled out the term last year for Bill Sanford, who had moved on and went to the board. So that was a 1-year appointment, and that position has to be reelected this year. So the top 5 voters will each serve a 3-year term. The next 2 vote receivers will serve a 1-year term this year, and there's 12 nominated individuals for the 7 positions that are open. So, Stacy Hughes, I'd like to take a moment and recognize her for her outstanding service of 12 years to the ARIN community. And I would like to ask Stacy to come forward to the stage. Stacy has been an amazing asset on the Advisory Council. Don't want to start any bad rumors, but when something needed to be abandoned and we were hemming and hawing, she was the one to come out and say, why aren't we just abandoning this thing? So we're really going to miss her on the Advisory Council, but I want to take a minute to recognize her service and present her with I know Stacy doesn't really like microphones, but I'm going to give her a moment.
Thank you so much. The funny thing is, I'm not very good at speeches, but I am good at toasts. So, cheers to me. No, really, cheers to you. Thank all of you for your participation and the guidance that you have given the Advisory Council over the years, and especially for me, helping me grow in my career on the AC and as a person. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I have to interrupt. Okay. I don't understand why, after someone serves for 12 years, we give her something as perishable as a bunch of flowers.
Oh, she got others.
She has a plaque. Yes.
That was from me to Stacy. Okay. That was just from the chair.
I have a glass thing at home.
So next up, I want to recognize someone with a clue. Mr. Bill Dart, an original member of the ARIN Advisory Council.
Come on up.
Come on up, Bill. I noticed you both sat in the back of the room so you could do the diva walk up the aisle. Strolling. So, and this isn't the only thing Bill's going to get either.
No.
Vince,
Yeah.
so. But we do have this certificate of appreciation which reads, "This certificate is presented to Bill Dart on 10 October 2014 in recognition and appreciation of outstanding service to the ARIN community while serving on the ARIN Advisory Council continuously from 1997 through 2014. Your contribution is invaluable in the support and advancement of the Internet. Thank you, Bill." The last original member of the advisory.
So this is a great honor to be here. You know, I'm really grateful to the original Board of Trustees for, you know, honoring me by the selection that they made, you know, from amongst all the applications that they must have had to serve on the original advisory council. And that was a great honor and a validation of my educational career and many people I've served and helped understand what the internet was and all that sort of thing. But the continuation of that was the community reelected me for all these years to serve them, and I can, you know, I'm really grateful for that. It's been an honor and a privilege, to be sure. You know, the Advisory Council is a very important part of this community effort, and the people that I've served with throughout, you know, I've seen criticism at times about the Advisory Council, but I'm here to tell you, having been there all the time, that there's no greater service that has been rendered by the most professional and dedicated people I've ever worked with, have been continuously serving on the Advisory Council. And again, it's just a great privilege to have been involved with this great organization and all the staff and board for all these years. But of course, what I'll miss the most is all of you. I've formed great relationships with so many of you, and it's just been an honor. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. So the mantle passes on to Kathy. Kathy's now the longest-standing advisory council member. I'm not saying anything about your age, Kathy, just how long you've served. Okay, so the AC role in the policy development process. So we work with authors on proposals to ensure a valid problem statement. We move that to a draft policy. We gather input from you, the community, through several means, PPML, PPMs, PPCs. Well, I think everybody knows those acronyms, so I'm not going to extend them out. Once we get that and we feel, the AC feels, hey, this is ready to become policy, we move it to a recommended draft policy, which we then present at a public policy consultation such as this. Make sure that we got it right. If we have it right and we get the support that we feel we're going to need to move it to last call or to policy, we then move it to last call, making sure everybody else that wasn't able to attend the meeting gets one last look at it, and then we recommend it to the Board of Trustees. In 2014, it was a busy year, second busiest, I think, ever, as far as proposals go. There was 23 new proposals, 6 went to the Board of Trustees and were adopted, 4 were abandoned, 1 is currently recommended, 9 are currently draft policies, 2 are just proposals that have just come in, and 1 was remanded back to the originator who dropped it. And there was also 2 from 2013 that were draft policies that moved to recommended and went to the board. So the ARIN Advisory Council does a lot more than just policy, though. We basically are asked by ARIN and ARIN staff to fulfill a lot of volunteer obligations, and we take that, pretty like it's cool. It's great. It's we get to go to the fellowship program. We get to meet with the first timers and help them navigate their way through the meeting. We participate in the outreach program, which is ARIN on the road. We do some conferences such as CES, Interop, and a few others. And mostly we focus on the IPv4 depletion and IPv6 education, and we promote ARIN meetings. We also had 2 members that were selected to participate on the nomination committee, and we participate in anything else that staff needs augmentation for. They come and they ask the AC, hey, you got anybody that would like to volunteer for this? And I think we've almost always stepped up and fulfilled those. So that's it. I got one last thing. Since this is my last meeting as the chair of the advisory council, I would really like to thank all of ARIN staff, the entire ARIN staff, and the community. But I would feel bad if I didn't really name these guys that have helped me through the last 6 years. And that's Einar and Nate, Leslie, Susan, Therese, and JC. These guys have been there and supported me through those 6 years and made it a lot easier. So thank you, and remember to vote.
Okay, moving right ahead, we have the treasurer report. I'll invite Paul Anderson, ARIN's treasurer.
Well, while we're waiting for the slides, can we give a proper round of thanks to Mr. Sweeting for his years of chairmanship of the... we can't forget about you, because I know it's been an honor working with you in various roles, and I know he's done the AC very well. After I find my clicker, I'm going to give a very brief treasurer's report, and I'm going to be a little faster than usual so I can save some time for the next presentation, which Hint has to talk about fees. So if you have fees questions, we're happy to take them in the next one, but just to give you a quick update. Oh, that's right. It's coming. So, yeah, for those of you who don't know, I am ARIN's treasurer and also lead the finance committee, which is also composed of fellow board members Bill Woodcock and Aaron Hughes, along with John Kern as a staff liaison. We're responsible for overseeing ARIN's finances. I'll just kind of go a bit backwards in the presentation. We've had a reasonably quiet time since you last saw us, but the fall really does get very busy for us, because that means we are about to, or well, it's already underway, our budgeting process for our next fiscal year, which is also calendar. So over the coming months, the FinCom will be working with staff to develop the budgeting for next year. Oh, sorry. It was so subtle, I didn't even notice it came up. Having said that, over the last, since we last saw you, we dealt with our annual 990 filing, IRS. We wrapped up the fee review committee, which of course we'll discuss next. And we met recently with our investment audit advisors just to make sure that and see what trends we might be seeing in the future. To give you a quick snapshot, and I know that earlier we kind of went over some of the revenues, but revenues are pretty much as expected and on target. Expenses are not also reasonably on target. We're looking right now at about a 2.6 million net to reserves. Again, part of that from an operating result, but a lot also due to very positive returns from our investments in the market. Just giving a quick overview of where we are financially, and these numbers are as of the end of August. We've seen a reasonable downtick in a few areas, notably communications is down a little bit due to a renegotiation for connectivity. Depreciation is also not where is a little higher than expected, and that's just due to some timing of some of the projects that are ongoing. Mostly that's driven by a lot of Mark's engineering products because they tend to be a lot of the capital intensive projects. Professional fees are actually quite down due to, again, mostly due to some engineering professional services that we were planning to engage, which have just been pushed out a little bit. And there's also been some changes in where amounts are budgeted. Specifically, there's been some change to where travel is budgeted when it has to deal with outreach. General office is down a little bit because we've delayed some renovation projects. Legal in both amounts is much higher than expected. The legal defense fund item, that just has to do, we don't generally actually budget for that. That tends to be where we catch some of the various court cases that we've been involved in, we're not necessarily litigating in, but a lot of the bankruptcy court cases we sometimes have to get involved with and intervene, and I can leave it to John if there's any other questions on that. And legal itself has been a little bit higher than projected. Just gotta make sure I'm on the same slide. Members' meetings are actually down a little bit. That's actually a bit due to some optimizations on just overhead costs, but mostly thanks to increased sponsorship. So thank you to all our sponsors for helping out on that. And the last one is travel is actually down quite significantly. That has been thanks to the efforts of both staff, the AC, and the board, which we have been trying to be more efficient in how we spend on travel, and also we've been tighter on who we actually send to those events because we know that we've had some feedback on that. And the last one I'll put is that our funding for ICANN is just a little bit different. That has to do just with the fact that the formula that the NRO uses for what our contribution changed last year, we budgeted under the old formula, and the new formula had a slight variation. Reserves continue to grow, which is always good that they're in the right direction. Just to give you an idea, there's kind of been our reserve history. Again, ARIN has been very lucky and gracious, thanks in part to our good investment advisors, that we've had very good returns, except for in 2008 when most people had a bit of a dip. And just as a reminder, we do keep a policy. We do try and keep between 1 and 2 years. We are starting to get to the upper limit of that. So the FinCom and the board will be discussing ways that we can deal with that, whether we'll start drawing down more from the reserves or other ways that we can utilize that. I would welcome any feedback either now or later that the community or members may have on either how we could, what we would use reserves for, or any input you may have as we get into our budgeting policy. And that is about all I had, noting that fees are about to come up. So if there's any questions.
Microphones are open.
Thank you as always.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, we have 2 presentations before we're done. The first one is I'm going to give I think it's 2. Let me double check. Sure. Yes, I'm going to give the fee structure discussion, and then Vince Cerf, our chairman of the board, will do our Board of Trustees report. So I'm going to talk about the fee structure review process and what was produced. Then we'll have a little time for questions, recognizing that we still have Vince's report and an open mic for everything else. So, fee structure review panel. The last time we changed our fee schedule, which was discussed in 2012, and we changed in 2013, people said, well, you just did an incremental change, and we're not even sure if that's the right approach. A lot of philosophical questions came up about how the fees should actually be structured, not what a particular line should look like. So we impaneled a fee structure review panel to consider various long-term fee structures that were suggested by the community on the topic and summarize the pros and cons back to the ARIN board and community. This draft report of the fee structure review panel is complete. It's a balanced document describing each of the approaches on how ARIN might structure its fees going forward. We actually used the full year numbers from 2013 to model, so we actually have in the report what the current membership would look like and the current fees and revenues would look like for each of the proposals. And then it provides a common basis for discussion of the merits of the various approaches. It does not provide a recommendation. The goal was, let's model these and see what they look like and let the community discuss what they think of that. Covers 7 alternative approaches for actually 6 alternatives and the current baseline for ARIN's recovery of costs in all contracted parties for registration services in a fair and equitable manner. The members of the panel, Paul Anderson, Aaron Hughes, Bill Woodcock, myself, and then we called from the community and at-large members, Tim St. Pierre, Steve Feldman, Brandon Ross, Daniel Alexander, and Mike Sinatra. Because the fee structure committee did its job and produced a report and is now concluded, I'd like a round of applause for these people. Hopefully their report will prove useful in the discussion. The report was sent out last month to ARIN Discuss and ARIN PPML. You can get it online. There's a URL on this presentation that links to that message. It covers, as I said, the current fee structure and 6 proposals. There's a short summary of each proposal, what it proposes, what the pros and cons would be, and I've actually included them in this presentation. But if you go to the actual document, you will find an appendix for each one of these proposals, and each appendix has the full detail of the proposal and the actual fee table for each one, and the modeling against the current membership, or actually the 2013 membership, and a graph showing what it looks like as a histogram of the fees as applied to the membership. So there's quite a few pages to the document. I'm only going to go through the summary of each of these. We're going to open up a community consultation next week. We will have it on ARIN Consult. It'll be available to anyone, member, non-member, to participate and to read this document, give your thoughts about what direction, if any, ARIN should take. It's not inevitable that we have to change the structure of the fee schedule. But if you want to take it in a certain direction, here's 6 possible directions, and you can advocate for one and explain why. I'll say at the end of that process, I'll summarize all of that. I'll bring it back to the ARIN Finance Committee, the Board of Trustees Finance Committee. They're the ones who actually make recommendations to the full board for any fee schedule changes. So they would be the ones that set staff off in a direction to develop a specific fee schedule for everyone to consider. So it'll be community consultation, summarize to the ARIN FinCom, and then if they direct me to model an alternative, I'll model one and bring it to you folks. So the current fee schedule, and I think everyone knows the current fee schedule, but I'm going to summarize really quickly. We have 2 different ways of having fees. One is for service providers who pay an annual registration services subscription, and one is for end users that pay a fixed maintenance fee based on the number of records. Legacy holders pay under the end user fee schedule, recognizing that most legacy holders have a cap. They can only charge, Nate, are we 125 this year? Going to 150. There's a cap in the LRSA that says it's $100. It can go up 25 per year. We've raised it once. So legacy holders pay as end users for their records, and there's a cap, but over time that will slowly ramp up as we raise that to match other members. Okay, ISPs pay based on an annual amount based on the service category that accommodates both their V4 and V6 holdings. So there is a tier, and based on where you fit in V4 and V6, whatever category will meet both of your holdings is what you pay. The fees step going from $500 a year up to $32,000 a year. Organizations with larger holdings pay that top category, XX large, for $32,000 a year. And that's also all in an appendix in the report. The benefits are simplicity. Based on the size of your holdings, you're in a simple category. You can budget it every year. If you get resources, unless you get a lot of resources, you don't necessarily change. So it's fairly predictable. When you do get a lot of resources, yes, it could move to a different category. It provides a single fee that covers both V4 and V6, which means everyone who has a V4 resources can get V6 without necessarily having their fees changed. Now, you may not get the amount of V6 you like, and that's a question, but everyone can get V6 without any corresponding change in fees for some size of V6. There's a problem at the bottom end of the scale, which one of these talks about. And the simplicity also means if we want to change fees, it's very easy to change one table of fees, lower them. We've lowered the fees several times over the years. So that's the current schedule. The concerns, a couple of concerns that were cited that kicked off this process. The larger 17 ARIN members actually have more space than the top tier. And they may not be paying, if we had an infinite number of tiers, they may not be paying what people would expect for the size of their holdings. Additionally, the present fee structure is interesting in that it provides benefits for ISPs because versus end users. If you're an end user with a lot of resources and you're paying $100 each, you could end up paying more than a small ISP. On the other hand, if you're an ISP, once you have an ISP, you pay a fixed fee regardless of how many address blocks you have. So there's a little bit of advantage to both categories. There's a difference between end users and ISPs, even though there's not necessarily a difference in the services we provide. Quite frankly, address blocks and registry maintenance is extremely similar with a very small number of exceptions that are very hard to account for. So we have two different categories now, and it's not clear whether or not there's a reason for that. And then there's some concern about the alignment, as I said, between V4 and V6. Presently, if you go to get IPv6, because of the current categories, if you get something allowed by policy, you will end up seeing an increase in your fees. These fees are lower than they were in 2012, but it's still a net increase. Okay, so here are the proposals. Okay, Proposal 1 is the current one. Proposal 2, first, very simple. Extend those V4 categories. Add XX large and XX large. Actually, the table's very nice. It actually gets XX large, XXXX large, huge, XX huge, XXX huge. It goes all the way down to any possible address holding. But realistically, it only affects about 20 members of ARIN. The fees keep going up. And so we'd end up with fees of $164 and $128,000. Is this appropriate? If you feel that people with large resource holdings need to pay more, it might be. But recognize that an address block in the registry actually doesn't really cost that much more to ARIN in terms of our actual costs. You're really charging more because someone sees more value to it. And also, the more our fees are based on V4 holdings, long term, we have to worry about what happens when V4 goes away. So if you have all this revenue and everything's great, and then 10 years from now everyone returns their V4 block, you get to see everyone's category drop precipitously down because everyone is sitting in V6. So you may not want to drink the Kool-Aid even if you want it, so there's some pros and cons. Okay, another issue, realign IPv6. And this is basically addressing that XX small issue. Basically, by taking the lowest tiers of the IPv6 category and having them start 3 tiers up so you can get an address block of reasonable size up to a 32 without paying anything more. You don't have to take a smaller V6 block. This has been cited by people as a way of preventing a V6 discouragement that we currently have, in that if you're the smallest ISP category, you'll pay more to get V6. And we're not trying to do that, so we should fix it. Note that there's a counterpoint, which is that, again, long term, a lot of people end up in V6 in very small categories. And if everyone ends up in the bottom category, then long term, we need to know what it looks like modeling, modeling for the fee schedule. So as it says here, a reevaluation of this policy may be needed when IPv4 usage is in decline to determine if revenue will be heavily impacted. Okay, the next proposal is linear IPv4 categories, which creates granular categories which go linearly up and down to all sizes, and it means that at the top end it's a $400,000 fee for the largest address holders, and it's believed to be very equitable and fair if you want to base it on holdings. And in terms of concerns, obviously the largest fees in those categories would be a surprise to people who got those invoices the first year we sent them out, so worth thinking about. Algorithmic. It's been noted that some people, rather than having discrete categories, one way to solve this and be quite proportional would be use a formula-based model based on total addressable allocations. And so this was modeled, and it provides a very smooth increase as resource holdings increase. The analysis is in the full document. The good news is that it rises proportionate. It would be very simple to change total revenues by adjusting the fee. We know other regions, AP-NIC has experimented with this. The concerns, of course, is that we need to make sure that whatever we model matches our revenue increase, so the formula needs to be tweaked the first time to do that. And the fee amounts don't fit neat buckets, so you'll end up with invoices of not round amounts, and they'll vary on any resource change. And so some organizations have indicated a budgeting issue with that. Okay. The next proposal would be a member-based fee proposal, and this is based on looking at a flat membership for all ARIN organizations that encompass everything ARIN does. And this excludes, this is based, whether you're an end user or an ISP, you include it all in the membership fee, everyone pays the same fee. If we actually counted all organizations using ARIN services, either V4 or V6, then we could actually set an annual fee of $1,400 a year. It would be completely independent of your resource holdings. Everyone would pay the same. Very easy to handle. It would be a relatively low-cost number for many organizations, of course, not for all. Nearly all end users under this model, rather than paying $100 per resource per year, would see an increase in what their current invoice is. The fairness of this presumes that everyone benefits equally from ARIN, or that the industry benefits equally and everyone should pay. And that is not necessarily the case. It's an indirect function, and so we have to decide how important it is to be equal among all of us. Many organizations have different fees based on different sizes. If you take that last model and you try to lower the fees to the lowest number you can and break out discrete transaction costs, you end up with a transaction fee-based proposal where we have a single flat fee for everyone and significant fees for transactions, because we know people who come in and do transactions with ARIN do end up with us incurring costs. Under this proposal, the fee would be $880 a year. In addition to this, the per transaction fees would be established for new resources and resource transfer requests at $1,900 and $3,800 respectively. These would be reviewed, could be reviewed and adjusted annually. Registry holders would have a very low cost fee. Everyone would pay the same. Transaction fees would make sure the parties incurring costs to ARIN would pay them. We don't need to have it solves the end user versus ISP fee structure, and it would dramatically increase ARIN membership. Everyone would be a member, end users, ISPs of all categories. The increase, of course, to everyone would still be a concern. We would need to make sure that we are collecting appropriately so we don't go through all the work of a transaction and have someone then not pay the fee and give up on the transaction. And there's a perception issue that the people who aren't using ARIN very frequently are subsidizing those who use ARIN more frequently, even if it's not through transactions, it's just through help desk requests and calling in, et cetera. So those are the proposals, and they go different directions. And now we're going to be able to have a consultation out to the community. There's some discussion topics in the report, and these are sort of some of the issues that are raised. Some of the proposals propose significantly higher fees for larger numbers. ARIN's costs are proportionate to address blocks and transactions, not discrete addresses. Is it equitable? We're looking for equitable recovery. Is it equitable? ARIN's mission: to improve the business conditions of ISPs in the entire internet community via management of number resources in the region, is a service to the entire industry. It's not services to individual organizations. Does the argue of cost recovery should reflect a flat fee or not? Furthermore, trade associations, some of them scale their membership based on the size of the participant. Is this better done based on revenue or budget by approximate of ARIN's fee structure does through total address holdings today? One of the questions that comes up is, should ARIN pursue a more service transaction-based fee approach? If we take that, do we need to change what ARIN is? ARIN is a trade association for the betterment of the industry. And if we actually get specific about providing services and charging people specific recovery, then you actually leave the trade association category and you look like you're providing a for-profit business. And so that's a directional change that could have an organizational change. And then the vast IPv6 address space allows for very large blocks, and there's very few counterpressures to that, causing people to right-size their V6 block. Is that an issue or not? Should we even worry about that? And should the fee be structured for convenience rather than to encourage efficient utilization? So these topics are also in the paper. Microphones are open for comments, and we're going to have an online consultation for the next 60 days. So people want to talk about one of those proposals or one of the issues raised? Go ahead, front and center.
Matt Petak, one quick question on this. You make it sound like there are 7 proposals and the consultation will be which of the 7 does the community prefer. Is there an option for mix and match and saying we like bullet point of one and, okay.
It's an open, this is just a discussion document, so you can start by saying, I'm looking at number 3 with this change, or number 4 and this, or half of 6 and half of 2, whatever you want. We just wanted to have a framework because this covers probably 80% of what people want to do.
Excellent.
Okay? Yes, center, middle.
Adam Thompson, Manitoba Internet Exchange. Going back to something you said before you got into the proposals was the mention that there is increasingly, and we're not quite there yet, not that much difference between ISPs and end users. And I've already had this argument with other people earlier this week, and I will iterate on the public record that my experience is with the smaller organization end of the scale, and at the small end of the scale there is no difference anymore. I would strongly encourage ARIN to look at gradually homogenizing those two categories wherever possible to eliminate confusion and needless distinctions. If that proceeds, then Proposal 6 makes a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, Proposal 6 will kind of happen by default if the distinction between ISP and end users is eliminated.
Thank you. One little note, services-wise, it is true that ISPs have the ability to do subdelegations, and it's not clear that that's available to end users. We've had discussions on occasion. We've talked to people about that. We try not to highlight the distinction, particularly, for example, you have a legacy holder who's paying end user fees but has existing subdelegations. You don't want to have to force them to be an ISP. So it's not even a universal black and white line. But in general, 97% of ARIN services look the same regardless of the type of your address block, correct? Yes, center middle.
Owen DeLong, Black Lotus Communications, speaking actually for myself as DeLong and DeLong Z. I wasn't thrilled when my fees went from $100 a year to $300 a year under the last go-around. I'm certainly not finding any appeal whatsoever in proposal number 6, where my fees would go to $1,400 a year. So I would argue that the distinction at the small end, because I'm about as small as you can get, I'm running an AS out of a house, is not a distinction without a difference. It's a very, very meaningful distinction, and I would argue against said elimination.
Understood. Center middle, go ahead.
Brian Johnson with ARIN. Relative to the proposal 7, transaction-based, would that include transactions that are automated transactions as well as person-to-person transactions?
So the reason this was discussed is because it was a question of fairness of recovery, and that's based on labor and labor categories. And so, no, I presume if we have to have a team doing a review and doing processing and working with you on the paperwork, this should correspond to the work involved. That was the impetus behind it. We'd obviously have to do an actual fee schedule, but presumably automated transactions would have very little cost as long as they have very little people involved.
Thank you.
Yeah. Center front.
Rob Seastrom, ARIN Advisory Council, Time Warner Cable, RES-Z. that dash Z means that I'm an LRSA signatory. When I became an LRSA signatory, the modest amount of money that was charged on an annual basis was intended to be something that made sure that there was a contractual relationship there, and that the client service provider relationship with ARIN was exercised on a frequent basis. It was intended to be a token amount of money. I advocated heavily for a lot of folks to sign LRSAs on that basis. Certainly, my ability to do that with a straight face is inversely proportional to the amount of money that's being charged. And if we're to go to 300, okay, fine, like, oh, and I'm not particularly pleased by this, but it is what it is. If it were go to 14, my ability to advocate for that would be asymptotic to zero.
Just to be clear, the people who have entered those agreements, many of them have caps that specifically say they can only increase $25 per year. So
the cap is on the rate, not on the ultimate amount.
Not on the ultimate number.
And shame on us for not insisting on that at the time that the LRSA was under discussion.
Do you believe there should be an in perpetuity difference in fees for LRSA holders?
That's a good question. It's worthy of discussion.
That's the question to be discussed.
I haven't thought that through particularly, but I haven't really been incented to until people started talking about orders of magnitude difference in what I might be paying as an LRSA.
Understood. Excellent comment.
Thank you.
Center, middle.
Milton Mueller, Syracuse University, and ARIN Advisory Council. I'm curious about the legal change that you noted might be required, the fee for services versus the business league model. I wonder how complicated and how that might affect membership in the organization.
To the extent that ARIN is a 503c6, we're focused on improving the environment of a particular business or industry. Mm-hmm. And we have to do that for the entire industry. To the extent that we collect fees from our community and we do that for the entire industry, it's very straightforward. If we collect fees from individual organizations and we attribute those to services to those individual organizations, and that set of service revenue increases, and it's tied to our costs, there's a threshold where someone would say, that is an activity that isn't a trade association activity. It's probably a more classic business activity. And so it's judgment call. We actually have had our current structure and our tax status reviewed even recently and found we're golden. We're fine as is. But if we took a direction specifically with the fee schedule that was to try to attribute a cost-service relationship and try to do it for a significant amount of ARIN's revenue, we'd probably have to revisit that. And it's not a difficult thing, but it might mean a subsidiary to do just that and handling the relationships between the two. It just adds, there's an overhead complication, I guess, that people would need to think about. Obviously, if a fee schedule brings us in a direction that we need to worry about, we get appropriate counsel and figure out how to do it.
Okay, and as a follow-up question to that, I'm just curious as to how much do you know and how much can you tell us about the cost drivers of ARIN's services?
Oh, yes. Actually, we put all of that in the same document. If you go to Appendix C of the document, you'll find the current schedule. You'll find that about 50% of our costs today are attributable to registry services, related registry development, registry services. About 10% is organizational. It's the members meeting and the elections and the board of trustees and the legal overhead. We have about 8% for internet governance, and then about 20 to 30% is ongoing registry operations. It's literally keeping the lights and the power fed to the servers, as opposed to registry development and policy meetings. That is in the schedule, so you can go pull it down in the report. Center middle.
Mike Burns, IP Trading, an AC candidate. In APNIC, transfer fees are tied to the size of the transfer. In ARIN, it's a flat fee. And in the proposal that combined a member fee with a transfer fee, it looked to be also a flat fee. I'd like to point out that a fee increase of this size is a counter incentive to small transfers and would more than double the size, double the cost of the smallest transfers. So it's real disincentive to that. And tied to that point, the idea of having members pay equally certainly has an egalitarian appeal, and combined with the fact that the cost of a registry entry with a /9 at the end of it is the same to you as a /24. However, in this case, the /9 has a huge financial asset value absent from the /24. And I think in that context, it makes sense to have larger holders of resources pay larger fees. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close the mics. Oh,
Yeah, if I can just add a few points. Oh, sorry,
go
was I
ahead.
next?
Mics are closed, but last person.
Oh, well, yeah, a few points I just want to make. First, I just want to reiterate, I guess what John said is that, you know, the purpose of this process was based on a bunch of feedback that occurred on one of the mailing lists that maybe once we changed our fee model last time, we didn't have the right one. You know, from our standpoint, the current fee model is recovering costs. You know, we're not saying that the fee model has to change in the near future. So I point that out. This was more about a discussion about equitable, and I don't believe the committee is really recommending any specific one. This was just trying to enumerate some strawmen. A second point on the whole end user versus ISP, one change that I think a lot of people forget that we did make in the last fee schedule was, while end users generally pay a fee every time they make a request and then pay a maintenance fee, and that's generally stayed the same, although I know we now charge a bit more on the maintenance fees. The subscription fee model changed more significantly. The last model that we had, ISPs were charged based on what their, for lack of a better term, peak request was per year. In other words, if you came for a 16 every year, you were in the category that charged a 16. We've switched that significantly now to just what is your total holding. So I think that's why we're seeing more discussion about why an end user versus ISP may look more and more similar, at least from a fee perspective. And by the way, just because they may become the same thing in a fee perspective doesn't mean that they won't stay separate in a policy perspective. And I would urge, Rob, for you to encourage any of those discussions that you can, and how can we best, you know, I don't think we're trying to discourage, and others have said, we don't want to discourage people from signing LRS or A, so if there's ways that we could deal with that, we'd love to hear feedback on that. So hope that's helpful.
People will see the announcement of the consultation go out. We'll keep it open. It's a pretty sizable topic. We'll keep it open for 60 days. And folks who feel strongly that one of these is a good direction or that nothing is a good direction should get on ARIN Consult and participate. As I said, I'll summarize that for the ARIN Board Finance Committee. Thank you very much. You can clap. Okay. And now our final presentation is Vince Cerf, the Chairman of the Board of Trustees.
I see that I have 10 minutes or less, and I'll try to make it less so that you'll have some time for open microphone. Could I have the slides, please? Is there? Oh, I get to control this myself. That's cool. There we go. Okay, so there are just a few things that the Board of Trustees does, and as you can see, a fairly long list of them have to do with financial and fiduciary responsibilities. I refuse to read every single one of these, but I want to draw your attention to a few in particular. First of all, we're quite conscious of the cost of travel, and so we're making sure that board members who are traveling to other than meetings like this one or other face-to-face board meetings clear that travel ahead of time. The second thing is that the audit was absolutely clean. I've been on many nonprofit boards in the past, and I can tell you that the way in which this audit was conducted and the way in which the staff responded produced a spotless report from the audit committee, and of course that made me and the rest of the board members, and I hope you, very happy. Another thing to point out is that we made some modifications to the bylaws, which I hope you noticed, and they were intended to protect your interests. So if you're not sure about what those were or what the intent was, just generally speaking, it was intended to make sure that the bylaws could not be changed without your consultation under for certain of the provisions in the bylaws. Let me go to the next slide here. The next thing is just to show you all the various things that got adopted. This has already been referred to. I want to emphasize the importance and value of the AC's work and the work of this community in helping guide the board towards provisions that it can, or recommendations and policies that it can adopt. And so you can see that you've done a great deal of work, and the board has concurred with the value and quality of your recommendations. There are a bunch of other things that the board does, and in fact, this is my last slide, and I want to point out something. As I was preparing, going through these, I realized that there's a lot of stuff that the board members do that you might not know about, and so I'm now going to commit to providing you with more regular information, not just in these meetings, but on the website, about the activities of board members who are serving your interests in many, many different venues. In particular, if you look at the last bullet there, I even neglected to mention ARIN on the Road, but there are board members who participate in that as well. I participated in the IGF. I've been very active along with the other board members in many of the internet governance activities, the committees that are producing various and sundry recommendations. This is a very, let me call it fluid time in the history of the internet. Our role as ARIN, our participation in the ICANN space, and the general interest of governments in let me say, asserting more authority over what goes on in the internet is an incredibly important topic, and it's one which has potential hazards in it. And so I can tell you that the board members, the AC members, and others who are engaged are here to protect all of our interests in keeping the internet open, useful, and productive. I have one last thing to mention, and that is an attempt to alert the general public to the importance of IPv6. By the good graces of the ARIN staff, I ended up on the Stephen Colbert show. And I have to tell you, that was a pretty remarkable experience. We did get a shot at what IPv6 was, which amazed me because I figured that Stephen wouldn't let me say anything sensible. The only other thing I can tell you is that it was not pre-planned. We didn't have any discussions about what we were going to say or do. And when he popped that matrix architect question on me, I was not prepared for that. But he got what he deserved. So I'll stop here. I thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to try to answer any questions you have. But let me thank you, all of you again, for all the support that you give to ARIN and the work that you put into it. Thank you.
Any questions for Vint or the Board of Trustees?
I'll turn the podium over to you.
I will ask for a round of applause for the Board of Trustees and all of their volunteer efforts that they make keeping the organization running. Okay, we are at the end of our meeting. The thing between us and adjournment is the open microphone. So we have an open microphone session. We will take any questions that people haven't had a chance to ask. Please approach the mics. Yes, center middle.
Hello, Terry Hoke from Sierra Tel. This is my first time attending this meeting, and I'd like to thank you for inviting me as an ARIN Fellow. I'd also like to thank Tina Morris for her excellent mentorship and the community for making me feel welcome. The topics have been broad in scope, and it's been very enlightening, and I hope to continue to participate in the future. I'd also like you to urge you to encourage people within your organizations to apply for the ARIN Fellowship if they can't otherwise attend this meeting. Thank you.
Center rear.
Rüdiger Volk, Deutsche Telekom. I would like to refer to something that did come up in the NANOC technical presentations. Wes George from Time Warner Cable did a very nice presentation explaining what various problems are facing someone who wants to seriously use RPKI. There are, and I agree very much, there are quite a number of interesting problems that need to be attacked. However, one of the major blocking stones in the way that he recognized and pointed out, in particular on slide 21 of his presentation, was the legal framework that is put around RPKI by ARIN. And looking from the outside, from where I'm coming, yes, ARIN looks less friendly for accessing the users, the members, the ARIN resource holders' data than the other RIRs. Well, okay, just take that report. I think for you in the region, it probably is much more important to note that serious companies, legal departments, come back and say, no way to sign those agreements. And as I gathered at the same meeting, well, okay, there are federal networks that say, well, okay, no way to do this. Let me try to give you a suggestion for taking another look and maybe coming up with a more appropriate framework that actually fits the design of RPKI better, and maybe at the same time you also look at the question of, well, okay, how are you presenting the interface to the system? Are you making it friendly to potential users, or are you giving a surface that looks like, well, okay, it is, well, okay, kind of threatening.
Understood. Rudiger, so let me respond, if you will. I was at the same presentation, and I hear your suggestion, and I commit that I will bring to the ARIN board the information from that presentation, as well as some thoughts on a fresh look at what we're doing. I don't know what will come out of that, because there's an important balancing that goes on, but I do commit to have the board have a fresh look. Maybe ARIN will get sneakier in where we hide the information like some of the other RIRs.
John, may I contribute a little bit of specific point of view that
Sure.
I think the current approach is kind of missing. The RPKI design assumes that the CAs actually put all the information, all the certificates on behalf of the users, the resource holders, or ARIN's members into the public by the repository system, which is not really very much different from a web PKI CA telling their users, yes, your stuff will validate because we bribe the browser vendor to put the root certificate there. The RPA, as you have it right now, quite clearly declares your trust anchor as a protected secret, which is very much the opposite of how the other PKIs work. And, well, okay, quite obviously is a barrier to the public access of your users' data or your client's data. I'm not completely sure what can and should be done on the RPA side, but I think it is very important to put much more emphasis on the side of the relation between the CA and the resource holders, and understand that the resource holders, when they sign up with the CA, actually are expecting certain service. Parts of Wes's presentation, I think, were asking for additional things aside from the RPA fix. In short, what is the major purpose of signing up as a client under an RPKI CA is I want to have a reliable service in publishing my certificates and making them, due to the RPKI architecture, actually publicly and easily available. I have very much the feeling that working on that contractual relation and figuring out what it means and what implications it has been probably missed and overrun by the considerations to protect ARIN as an organization, which of course is an important concern and is very well appreciated.
Okay.
Got it?
Yes, you want to respond, Bill?
Yeah, we've got a fast-moving train wreck here, and it sounds like what you're proposing is that we can make things better by taking the liability disclaimers off the tickets so that more people will get on the train. I'm not sure how this makes things better.
Well, of course, we can decide that improving routing security doesn't really matter. And I have to say, having worked on and looking at routing security for quite a while, I do not see any serious contender in town. And looking at the slow pace of development of such things, I do not see anything that really would be a reasonable alternate choice at this time and for the next 3 years.
Okay. Rudiger, as I indicated, I will bring Wes's presentation to the ARIN board, and along with some thoughts. ARIN's not trying to protect its trust anchor locator as a trade secret. That's a artifact of trying to make sure that the people who are using things in the CA actually have seen the relying party agreement. Other RIRs put a statement in their CA that say, if you use the CA, you're bound you're bound to indemnify us. That's an informal binding, and ARIN went with a more formal one. But I will bring it before the board along with some additional legal work. We'll try to make those materials that the board's used to be briefed available to you folks so you can see it. I want to recognize, just to highlight, that it's not a question. Nearly 3 of the 4 of the 5 RIRs have indemnification statements. We just wanted to make sure you actually saw it before you started using RPKI. Okay, Centerfront.
Rob Seastrom, Time Warner Cable, ARIN Advisory Council. I'm going to make 2 comments here, one of which is vetted with and speaking on behalf of my VP, who is out of the room on a conference call right now. And the sentiment here is have your people talk to our people. A consultation group that got together the attorneys from ARIN and attorneys from the large companies that are saying no, 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 no. Other RIRs that are saying no, 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 no. And other interested parties to hammer out an agreement that we can all live with to a certain degree would be a step forward. Now, that's the end of that statement.
And I will bring that as an option to the board. I do not know where that will go.
Thank you. We would like you to bring that as an option to the board. That's all I can ask. My response to Bill is it may be in fact a train wreck, but given that my group is sort of the Consumer Reports and National Safety Council, car testing people for our company, there is no point in us of making that evaluation for the organization if legal is just going to say, well, you can't run it anyway. So we are not allowed to spend time on going too far down that road to figure that out for ourselves if legal says no.
Okay, thank you. Center, middle, Mike.
Owen DeLong, excuse me, Owen DeLong, speaking primarily for myself. I have been approached by a number of members of the community during this meeting and in email exchanges, and there is a perception problem brewing, and I don't know whether it's merely a perception problem or an actual problem, but the perception is that V4 allocations and assignments are getting harder and harder and harder and more stringently reviewed, and V4 transfers are being permitted on a less stringent basis. I believe that the community was clear in linking the policies in Section 8 to Section 4 and that they wanted the same level of review and stringency applied to transfer requests as to free pool requests. And if this is merely a perception problem, then I would like to suggest that ARIN needs to do something to address the perception, because for any given individual outside the organization, perception is indistinguishable from reality.
Right. Okay, Owen, it's a real problem, real problem. When team review went in place, the way it was being done and what was being handled was not as efficient as it could be. As Leslie said, we took some corrective actions by moving certain queues off to the side, by changing the way the team review is structured so that that's now down to from 5 days for our turnaround on a response.
Yeah, I'm not talking about turnaround times.
When you talk about delays, that's where it would occur.
I didn't talk about delays.
Okay, I'm sorry, what did you say?
I talked about rigor and stringency of, you know, when I submit a request, how much additional documentation am I asked for? How much proof do I have to provide? Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a perception issue, I promise you.
Then the perception issue needs to get addressed somehow.
Understood, thank you. Well, we're down on the problem you didn't ask about, we're down to 3 and we're working to get it back within 2. Okay. Center, rear mic.
Oh,
Yes.
I'm sorry. I thought that was a comma. Sandra Murphy Parsons. I want to repeat myself from the comment that I made after West Georgia's presentation at NANOG. I'm not a legal person. I don't speak legal speak. The difficulty that I have in the RPA is the prohibition against sharing the information, which prevents certain architectures that we had thought would be valuable in the distribution of RPKI information. You can't get it from your neighbor. You can't get it from your IXP. You can't get it from your service provider. You must get it from ARIN. And I think that presents some networking and architecture difficulties. I think it puts ARIN in a position of having to make sure that their service is even more reliable. There'll be a single point of contact.
So Sandra, there's
Yes.
absolutely no intent of precluding any architecture that someone wants to use. We did have this problem at one point with reporting, for example. People wanted to do monitoring and availability reporting and statistical issues, and we actually have worked that. We actually have an agreement that specifically allows that. If you have a technical architecture for people who want to do route integrity and republication, and that's part of an architecture being considered, and people are going to need to get past that trust anchor issue, then we should definitely talk, because we're not trying to inhibit any architecture that the CITA group wants to come up with.
Okay.
Note, the party that's in there doing that publication service may not like the fact that they can republish, but they are still going to have to agree to something, but we can figure out an agreement that gives them that right.
I see.
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Center, middle.
Adam Thompson, again. Concerning RPKI, the obstacles that others have covered don't prevent me from participating. I just did sign my ROAs, but I am baffled. If I open a TCP connection and my packet doesn't make it all the way to the end host, I don't sue ARIN. If I look up a whois entry and the data is wrong, I don't sue ARIN. Why is the RPKI data so different at such a fundamental level?
Recognize that you don't sue ARIN in those circumstances, but if the bank you're serving ends up suffering because your use of RPKI, I'm not even worried about our service at all, I'm quite fine with that. I'm worried about your use of RPKI causes someone else to suffer, then they may turn around and sue everyone involved in the activity. And so it is not per se the party that is directly our customer. That's generally not a concern. It's the other party that might be the relying party on what you publish that we are ultimately worried about. Bill's small ISP with a bank that somehow gets impacted because he didn't understand how to correctly handle the fact that, well, maybe he couldn't refresh and validate a certificate, okay? And so it is, to be clear, we're setting up a system here, and what we're trying to say is, as people make use of this system, we want it to be clear that people are taking the right precautions. You want us to. We want everyone using this system to also take precautions, to realize that there are some failure modes that could result in people having to understand that they're not going to get the validation that they want inherent in the system right now. They were actually the 5 preceding pages in Wes's presentation about some of the failure modes. So it is really about third parties who are impacted because we're all making use of RPKI.
But may I continue for one moment? But this problem already exists in many other domains that aren't covered.
Good, then just click yes.
Like DNS, BGP
Excellent.
routing, like I can sync, well, I can attempt to sync 100% of VeriSign's traffic in about 10 minutes from now. And we have mechanisms that handle that. People start ignoring my AS advertisements.
The fundamental difference between the examples you cite and RPKI is that the purpose of RPKI is to carry a cryptographic assertion, a signature, that ARIN stands behind the veracity of the statement. Right? So that is a legal hook into ARIN's legal defense fund and reserves. That's all it is. There is no other purpose of RPKI other than to give you a legal hook into someone with deep pockets if they make a misrepresentation.
Let me say something. As I pointed out to Wes in his own presentation, when you contract for service, it is not uncommon to find an indemnification clause. His own services offered by TWC have the same third-party indemnification clause. As we grow and professionalize the internet, it may be that we don't have agreements, but as we add them, you're going to see these happen for services. This is a new service, so we're actually putting the agreements in place that we probably should have for others. Okay?
I think
Yes,
it's
Senator Front?
worthwhile,
Go
but
ahead.
I think we're exceeding, our reach is exceeding our grasp with RPKI at this time, legally.
Okay, Senator Front?
But you don't ask to indemnify, like the user doesn't have to indemnify VeriSign for providing a certificate for Bank of America. And that's more like the situation you're getting into where you're saying like, you know, some ISP's downstream customer needs to sign your agreement in order to use the system. And you don't have that in other, areas.
Right.
So-
As I said, other RIRs have taken other approaches.
Not RIRs, I mean in other, so like,
No, I understand not RIRs. I'm saying other
Certificate issuing
RIRs have
bodies.
taken other approaches of doing that same requirement that we've done for RPKI and getting that same agreement with that customer by simply embedding it in their CA and saying use of the CA binds you in that manner.
Sure.
It's the
pointing
same
at it.
agreement, it's just they didn't click to acknowledge.
okay.
Okay?
I actually came up here for other stuff.
Okay, so hold, let's keep, do you have RPKI, Rudiger?
Yeah, just short comment for Bill. I hear you saying the only thing to do routing security is to create situations to litigate. I'm really of a very different opinion.
I'm not saying that at all, Rudiger. I'm not I'm saying if we offer a service.
Bill was speaking this way.
You're failing to distinguish between security and RPKI. RPKI is a method of attaching digital signatures.
Okay.
And it is the way for getting reliable information for doing your routing decisions, which is the part where the security comes in.
Okay. So people on RPKI, I got Jeff at the back mic. Anyone else? Okay. So in order, at the back mic, go ahead, Kevin.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire, NAC. It sounds like this is a great time to do a very open public discussion on RPKI. This has been an issue from a financial point of view in draining resources from ARIN. This has been an issue in implementation. This has been an issue. And it sounds like let's get the cat out of the bag and have a real discussion on this. It sounds like from my perspective, the community needs it at some point and is saying there are roadblocks. I don't know what they are. We're not going to have enough time at the mic to do it, so let's actually have something substantive.
So Kevin, let me respond to that because I actually have to take exception. This actually is the time, unfortunately, or on the list, yes, but ultimately, this is a risk trade-off, and it is not the community's call. It's the board's call. Now, I'll make sure that the community gets some materials to see how that trade-off is made, but even some of that ultimately is a fiduciary duty. So I recommend you find a trustee and grab them and start having that conversation, because that's who I have to have it with.
So, John,
Okay?
just to say one thing, none of us in the room are lawyers. Some of us are smart enough to know we're not lawyers. Maybe even having a, what's the word, an overview that explains why we're doing it the way we're doing it would be appropriate.
And that's what I was committing to, is saying, I think we got to take a fresh look, and we'll try to get the briefing materials in front of the community as much as we can in front of the board.
Thank you.
Okay. Jeff?
Jeff Houston, APNIC. I've had a long experience inside this, and I would actually like to say firstly that there is a distinction between the resource public key infrastructure and its use in routing.
Yes.
What we originally thought about, and it's about 15 years ago inside APNIC, was we wished to take WHOIS, a bunch of ASCII, and try and put something around it that said, if they're my resources, I have something, a private key, that can help me make attestations about those resources that just doesn't rely on some text in a database that really doesn't nail it down. And this seemed like a good thing. I think it still is a good thing. In and of any other application, it's a good thing because it makes the registry work better.
Right.
And in that registry context, the issues around general use are very different. Because typically you don't look at all the registry all of the time, you look at that entry once. And so the consequences of any form of failure are limited to that inquiry once. And then some bright people, who at the time were having the same thought in other rooms, thought, you know, we need to secure routing. And then this RPKI comes along, it goes, you know, it could be really, really useful. The problem with routing is that all the routes are with you all of the time. So it's no longer I want to open this door. Every single door needs to be opened at once. Correct. The consequences of failure in that interlocking key infrastructure in routing can verge on catastrophic because it's everybody all at once. And so operators very high in that trust hierarchy are vulnerable. And all of us at the RIR level have looked at this going, this is uncomfortable because the consequences of failure, and I don't think it's a UPS thing, but you know, failure does happen, could be catastrophic on routing, and that makes us all feel extremely worried. So yes, there are disclaimers. Yes, there are things going, look, you know, this is really, really hard. At the same time, it's certainly from APNIC, and I know from the other RIRs, we're trying to go back to the standards folks saying, can we make this a little bit less fragile? Can we alleviate some of these concerns? So when you say I'm uncomfortable, when Wes George says, you know, look, we're not going to do it now, it'd be nice to say it's ARIN's fault because that seems, you know, the meme du jour. But it's not. It's not ARIN's fault. And it's not the way you've actually done explicit permissions in using your TA material. That's not the root cause of the problem. This is a hard problem. And after 20 years of studying it, it's still a hard problem and we don't have easy answers. What we've done so far is a prototype, as far as I can feel. There is more work to happen in developing the technology. It's not finished. Give us a bit of breathing space, please, and allow us to look at this and see how we can make it really work. Because, like it or not, we're going to be stuck with BGP for a long time. And if it's the state of the current security, we're all toast. We need to make it better. But, you know, it needs a bit of cooperation, not just head bashing. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay. Center front.
I'll resist to urge to keep going on about RPKI. So at one point you said, like, grab your friendly board member. And the question that I had is about board transparency.
Sure.
And a couple different parts of that. So, and also the ACSP. So there are several items in the ACSP that have been open for a long time, some of which have been open since 2008. I get up and say this every meeting. So not all of them are, many of them are IT-related things that I know that you're working on. Not all of them are. Some of them include things like term limits, candidate speeches, and geographic diversity of candidates running for the AC and the board. The comments on all of those, and they're in various states of open and closed, but comments on all of those were that they were being referred to the governance committee on the Board of Trustees. And so I would like to encourage, either now or at a future meeting, feedback from the governance committee about those items.
So there was 3 items that I think you said: term limits, changes to candidate speeches, and board diversity. And
Geographic diversity of candidates. Of not of candidates, because I know that there's been some work on that in NOMCOM, but actually geographic diversity of
seats.
Looking more at the actual selection process of how do you seat the bodies, whether you elect them, nominate them, appoint them.
No. So I put a suggestion into the ACSP that would require there that would mandate that there be geographic diversity of candidates on both, not candidates, of seats on the board and the AC. You must have one from each region.
Right, okay, composition then.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that was so kind of a gripe. That was like immediately closed and said that it was referred to the governance committee. Some other items like term limits and candidate speeches are still open, all under the umbrella of governance.
Okay, well, let me deal with the specifics, and then John might have more general. In terms of composition, there was, I believe, a error in that wasn't actually properly referred, so our apologies, but strangely, it is something that is kind of on our radar, and we have been kind of looking at both the AC and the board on what the composition should look like for those, and with an eye to how can we make sure that we ensure that there's geographic diversity, or that at least all 3 of our serving regions, because we identify Canada as one region, US, and then the Caribbean are served. I don't have an answer for you there, but I did get some good feedback from yourself earlier and some other members of the community, so we are trying to do that. But if you have ideas on how that might look, I am happy to hear them and pass them to the committee. On the on that one.
So one of the things that we've been trying to do with the fellowship program is make sure that there are people from all 3 regions getting to the meetings who wouldn't otherwise be able to, as a stepping stone towards having there be more electable candidates to the AC and the board.
Yeah, and the fellowship committee, the fellowship program is great. I've helped with that before. It's great.
Yeah, no, I think just one of the easiest ways that we hope that we can get people on there through, the current mechanisms is get them here so people can get to know them, I think is what, so hopefully that one's easy. In terms of candidate speeches, we did look at that and have decided there was some suggestions. Should we look at, should they be pre-taped? Should they be live? What restrictions should we put on that? And the view that we've generally come to on that specific one was that, we do ask candidates to try and keep any speech focused on that, but the feedback we kind of heard from many was the electorate would like to decide. If somebody decides to get up and start talking about bananas for 3 minutes, then let the electorate decide how they want to deal with that. We are, though, however, as recently as just this morning, discussing ways, though, that we can better get information to the membership, not only the people who are in this room, but also the wider community. But I don't have anything further on that for you because it's still in very early stages. And on the third one, the term limit, that seems to, I know that has cropped up many times. There was a fairly vivid discussion on ARIN Discuss. I believe ARIN Discuss. Was it ARIN Discuss? I think it was cross-posted, to be honest, is why I'm getting a bit confused. I think our view is that there does not seem to be consensus, and I do not believe that we'll be making any, there's no plans to make any changes in that regard in the near future, but, it is an area that has been revisited. Because
so, concisely, my feedback is the governance committee should report back to the community once a year or so on some of these things when they're outstanding and let folks know what's going on. Like, that would be nice.
It is a committee of the board, so it generally reports to the board, and the board should be reporting back. But I hear you, and I agree.
Someone tell people out here.
And it's also my fault.
I agree. There was a small mechanic issue, and I agree, especially when ACSP items are getting in there. We need to find a better way to get that back to you. So
I take the fall for two of those, lack of report back, because the board was concurrently discussing them while you submitted them, and I wanted the board discussion to finish. In some cases, it only just finished. Okay. There was a third item, though, that you raised, and I just want to, board transparency?
Yes.
Okay.
And so that's...
Current state is meetings are announced in advance. Agendas to those meetings are posted in advance. We've begun to post attachments for those meetings, the attachments that we can, sometimes we can't because they're privileged or confidential. The board has been increasingly putting emphasis on making sure that you know their meeting and what they're talking about and what the materials are. And we've seen a lot of progress there. I hope to see more of that in the coming year.
So that's all lovely. Thank you for that. However, when you read the board minutes, and I understand board minute, not just the ARIN board, but many boards' minutes are kind of sum up what happened.
They're like AC minutes.
Yeah. Well, AC minutes actually are very detailed, and they say, like, Heather Schiller suggested this, and you can read the AC minutes and get a fair idea of, what particular AC member's response was to a given policy. It is extremely difficult to read through the board minutes and get any sense of where specific board members stand, and not everybody has the luxury of being able to grab individual board members and get information from them. And so when it comes time for elections, it's really hard to see what folks are doing and where people stand and exactly what's going on. And so anything that could be done to increase transparency around that, and I would encourage anyone in the room who has to speak to that as well.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Can I start that?
Oh, sure.
So I certainly feel the same thing that you do very keenly, right? And
I didn't hear this.
I feel the same thing that you do very keenly, that there is not a forum by which the board, members of the board, have a way of communicating to the community what it is they're up to, right? Once every 3 years, we get 3 minutes to say what it is that we think we've been up to, right? That doesn't feel to me like the best way to communicate what our positions are. And on the one hand, so there's a little bit of a conflict between giving sitting board members more opportunity to tell the community what they're up to and the desire to have the term limits and saying that sitting board members are already at a structural advantage in elections and so forth, right? As a sitting board member, I'd very much like to have the podium some of the time to talk with you guys about the issues that I think are important and why. But at the same time, that's more of your time that I'd be chewing up with things that I think are important and don't know whether you guys think are important at the potential expense of the outreach of other candidates who might be trying for the seat that I'm sitting in.
So I also want to be very clear. I'm not even actually talking about policy issues. So it's really all the other stuff that, what is an individual board member's view about ARIN's, financial plan, or how money is going to, I know, and so like, that's the thing, like, you can see, policy passed with a roll call vote, and you have some sense of what happened there, but for everything else, it's like a black box, and you don't know what's going on.
Got it. Okay. On the topic of board transparency, diversity, candidate speeches, board minutes, is that what you're on, Kevin?
No.
Okay, is that what you're on, RS? No, are you speaking on that topic?
I am speaking on that.
Please
topic.
do. I am closing the mics for other topics. If you're going to, so after Kevin, if you have any other topic, get to the mic now.
Rob Seastrom again. I've had private conversations about the way that putting stuff into the ACSP box sort of feels like it kind of disappears. I'm going to avoid using inflammatory language here and just say there seems to be no SLA, and with no SLA, there's no SL. And yeah, there's no S. And I would appreciate a commitment from the board to promptly dispose of, communicate back on whatever goes into the ACSP box in a quick manner. It's the only way we have to communicate our desires on things that are not directly affectable by changes to the NRPM.
Right. So I want to do one quick thing. Some of that, again, is back to me, because the ACSP was originally envisioned for suggestions about how ARIN operates. So it actually goes to me, and we actually about 60% of the ASCs have been closed, particularly in the operational. Can you change this field? Can you do this? Can you add this feature? We still have development backlog because we're catching up on a lot of work, but we're making progress on them. The ones that go to the board, I guess, I bring to the board on agendas where there's time to put them, and maybe either we need a different process or I need to be a higher rigor so you can know your matter's gone before the board. And that's something I got to talk to the board about. Go ahead.
Yeah, if I can reply to that briefly, okay. I don't expect instant gratification. I don't expect everything that goes into the ACSP to be prioritized at the higher level. I understand the operational constraints that you have. I do, however, like to hear back that, like someone heard it and it's being taken under advisement. And by the way, we probably won't get to it this quarter. We're sorry.
Got it.
So the only thing I wanted to add was just to take or tweak one of your comments, or just because you said this is the only way we can let you know. And I would agree it's the formal mechanism, I guess. And as John said, there's probably some improvements, but I would encourage that, our email addresses are on the website, we're in meetings. If there's informal thoughts that you have, I know myself and almost all the other trustees and John himself are always happy to hear those concerns if you want to do that. So please feel free to.
I think I don't want to be sarcastic here, but I never do that. I never talk to board members or staff or anything like that.
I know you don't, but I was just you made it sound like it was the only way. And
I understand that, but it is, you're correct. It is the only formal way, but it's the way that's well publicized and doesn't require one-on-one working relationships to people to come and say, hey, I need this, hey, I need that.
Right. So the formality is a really good thing in a lot of ways. It gives transparency, it gives public feedback, everyone can see what the question was, what the answer was, and so forth. I was going to make a suggestion. Maybe I should use this.
That might be the wrong word.
A possibility would be that suggestions that go in be explicitly directed to either the staff or the board. If they're directed to the staff, then John deals with them however he sees fit. If they're directed to the board, then it's not unreasonable, assuming that we don't get 10 of these a week, to expect a written response from every board member, right? That would be part of the public record. That would let you know where we stand, and it wouldn't be us grandstanding.
I think that's a great idea, and it should be made explicit on the ACSP webpage if everybody in your team concurs.
Okay, you can sit down and work on that. Okay, Nate, I'm going to close it. Closed.
I was going to respond to something. Okay.
Closed. Okay, Senator Rear.
Very quickly, Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire, NAC. At the last ARIN meeting, you discussed changes to the RSA, LRSA. Can we get an update on that? Because it does affect policy, I think.
All right, so I actually held it, given everything we had in this meeting and what the board had already been working on. I held the engagement with the board on that topic, I'm going to resume it immediately after this meeting. So I have a draft, and now it's a question of engaging with the legal and board to move that ahead. But literally, we didn't have enough cycles because of everything else going on. I could not get that and get that in front of you in a reasonable manner before this meeting. It just, we were too busy with other work. But it is top of the queue now.
I appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, queues are closed. Open mic session is completed. I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and this concludes our ARIN member meeting. Thank you.
John, I have one thing.
I can do it. Whoa. So all AC members gather 15 minutes, and then we get AC members 15 minutes, and then you gather in the Conway room. Please vote. The elections are open. This is how you choose AC and board members. Thank you to our sponsors one more time. Don't forget your meeting survey. And I will see you at the, thank you for being here, ARIN 34. We will see you both at the PPC, at the ARIN on the Road, and at ARIN 35, April, San Francisco. Yay.